Hello and welcome. I am Chilling Tales, and as you get ready for bed, you must know that you are doing amazing and you deserve all the sleep you can get. So as you are winding down, let me know where you are from and what time you are watching this video. Like and subscribe to help the channel if you'd like. Now put your mind at ease and let the story unfold. You tell yourself it's only the building breathing. The old place exhales as the heat kicks, sighs where plaster loosened, murmurs where pipes remember a winter from decades back. You listen in the dark with your mug cooling on the windowsill, city lights brushed thin across the glass, and decide the sound is like a cat purring 2 rooms away. Warm, rhythmic, almost kind. It's a good thought to hold as sleep folds over you, softer than a cardigan. The hum deepens when your eyelids sink, a gentle pressure against the spine, a low cello note that never needs to end. You picture ocean water traveling through the radiators, tide moving under painted metal. There is a small draft that licks your ankle. It tickles, asks nothing. Later, because all nights have a later, you open your eyes to the same darkness, but the hum is closer, no longer in the bones of the walls, but within your pillow, a voice under feathers, measuring your breath and copying it. In, and it comes in, out, and it goes out. This should alarm you, and somehow it doesn't. You've listened to fans and trains, roommates and storms, the long roll of boredom. This is only another curve on the road. You let sleep gather you again, and your last waking thought is that the sound is spelling something, like a Morse code you once learned for a school project. Dots and dashes in the hush. When you wake, it's late morning, street noise like soft rain, and there's a mark on the inside of your wrist, a pale oval, as if something cool rested there. You press it, and the old floor answers with a tired creak. Welcome, perhaps. You smile at yourself. Don't start with hauntings on the first weekend. But then you find the envelope at the baseboard by the radiator just there, with your name written in a careful, tidy script, too neat to be a neighbor's, too old-fashioned to be junk. You stand, still barefoot, and pick it up. Inside there is a single square of lined paper, the kind from a steno pad, folded twice. Thank you for listening. It reads, just that. No signature, no date. The handwriting leans slightly to the right, precise enough to be patient. You carry it to the kitchen counter and leave it beside the fruit bowl, like a receipt you'll file later. And the day is errands and boxes, a brick of cheese and a jar of honey, a puzzle of which kettle belongs to which cupboard, and the small contentment of finding the right shelf for plates with chipped rims. When dusk comes, the building begins its night notes again. You rinse your tea mug, wrap your robe tighter, and switch off the last light. In the quiet, your breath is a raft, and the hum climbs aboard. You don't remember deciding to sleep on your back, but you are, flat as a book, palms open at your sides. The room is cool and clean, a smell like snow lurking in the seams of the windows. The hum is steadier tonight. It's in harmony with your heart, a second pendulum, an old grandfather clock agreeing with your pulse. The moon slides around a thin cloud and lays a fingertip of silver across your ceiling. That's when you notice the moth. It's perched on the top edge of the wardrobe, a small triangle, not quite dark, not quite light, the color of pocket lint saved for years. You don't move. Moths like stillness. Every few breaths, it lifts its wings and settles them again, and you think of a curtain opening and closing in a theater you've never entered. Okay, you whisper because sometimes it helps to make the room believe a person is in charge. The hum deepens in answer, unthreatening, as if the building wants you to know you're heard. You can hear your upstairs neighbor, the one with the quiet shoes, run a tap. You can hear someone down the hall laugh into a phone. You can hear your own blood listen back. When sleep drifts up again, it takes your hands gently. There is weight by your feet, a small dog's worth, the remembered shape of a pet you never had here, an animal made of memory. You don't look. If it is only a memory, noticing might chase it. The bed acknowledges you both. The sheets hold fast, and you go under the way. A coin slides into a pocket, unseen, but exactly right. The dream is simple. You are in a library that is more corridor than room, lined with narrow windows. The books are bound in blue cloth, and there's one the size of your palm, shelved at your heart's height. You take it. Inside are pressed flowers that crumble as you try to read the captions. You wake with a sound in your mouth that might be a word and might be a breath. The moth is gone. On the floor near the wardrobe, there is a single thread, pale, curved like a parenthesis. You pick it up and it sticks to your fingertip, and that's all. Later, in the lobby with mail you don't need, you meet the woman from 4C. She has an umbrella tucked under her arm, though the day is dry, and she says first month is the loudest. You blink at her, sleepy and friendly. The pipes? You ask. Everything, she says, and smiles the kind of smile that holds a door open. You get used to the listening. She presses the elevator button with the back of her hand, as if not to smudge anything. Upstairs, you put the kettle on. Steam threads the air. In the window's reflection, you catch the shape of your own head tilt, like you're leaning towards something, but you're already standing still. The note waits by the fruit bowl with its two small words, and as the kettle clicks, you are sure you feel the apartment hum, vibrate the paper into a nearly invisible tremble. Thank you for listening, it says again, and though you don't mean to, you say, you're welcome softly enough that the syllables fall apart before they hit the floor. On the third night, the hum develops a memory of consonants. It shouldn't be possible. You know this, you are sensible, but the sound turns the corners of a few letters, and your mind, eager to help, provides the rest. You lie on your side, and the mattress makes a harbor for the curve of your shoulder. The hum lowers itself to where your ear can cradle it, and you can make out something like names. Not yours, not anyone you know, but names with weight, the kind that pull a story behind them. Lenore, Maha, Silas, Yera. You repeat them to yourself, the way you'd count heartbeats in a waiting room. The city gives you its small kindnesses. Someone walking a dog stops below your open window and murmurs praise to the animal as if it were a child coaxed into shoes. A motorbike passes, distant and brief. You inhale warmth and exhale silver. Sleep is a neighbor who has borrowed sugar. So many times there's no need to knock. In the dreaming you walk the halls of your building, except they're longer, and the wallpaper has a geometric print you've never seen, and the lights wear little hats of shade. Each door has a paper tag hanging from the knob, like at a hotel, but instead of do not disturb, the cards read listen, or listening, or please keep listening, and sometimes thank you for listening in that tidy script. You try a knob and it turns, and there is a room inside where winter is pressing itself against the glass, and a teacup sits impossibly on the window ledge, full of dark lake water, and a woman sits on the floor with headphones on, eyes closed, smiling. You don't walk in. You move to the next door, and the card says please, and you understand the thank yous were not politeness. They were instructions in reverse. The moth crosses your path in the dream, and you follow. It leads you to the stairwell, where the air is cold, and the echo repeats your footsteps like a friend. On the landing, a child you've never met is asleep with a blanket and a book tucked to their chest. The hum arranges itself into a lullaby, and the child's breath steadies the beat. You wake with your hand against the wall, fingertips splayed as if you've been feeling the pulse there. It is still beating. You press harder, and the bass drum of the building thumps once, twice, slow reassurance. You think of the woman from 4C with her umbrella, with her instruction. You get used to the listening. In the laundry room, a note is taped near the coin slot. The machine only eats dimes, it says, and someone has written beneath it, in the same neat hand. The rest are for the house. You drop 2 quarters and nothing happens. You smile and feed in dimes, and the drum begins to turn. Water begins to speak. Before bed, you tape your own sheet of paper to the lounge's corkboard. Just one line. If the house needs anything, ask. You leave a pen on a string. In the morning, there are 3 additions. A request for quiet during the hours when the pigeons practice landing. A reminder to water the fern in the stairwell. And a line that is not a request at all. The house would like to keep you. You stare at that line for a long moment, feel your heart do its horseshoe toss, and land on a peg called maybe. And then you nod, as if you've been offered a blanket on a cold evening. Keep, after all, is not the same as take. The day is slow, kindly. You drink soup standing at the counter. You discover a groove in the windowsill your thumb fits like a key, and when you press there, the hum steps closer by an inch. It feels like leaning against a person you trust on a crowded train. You can't see them, but your body knows where they are. The 4th night begins before you want it to. Evening comes early with a lid of clouds, and the apartment dims itself as if saving electricity. You light a candle because your grandmother always did, and you liked the way the flame's little crown borrowed light from no one. The hum likes the candle. It gathers around the wick and makes a small shelter your eyes rest in without strain. You can see the moth again, patient as a librarian's finger. Your bed is newly made. Tight corners you pull loose on purpose, because comfort isn't tidy. The house waits. That's how it feels. Not haunting, not testing. Waiting the way a friend waits with a thermos, a chair kept warm. When you lie down, the pillow remembers you exactly, and the hum speaks a sentence you finally understand. It says, we sleep in shifts. It says there is always waking, and there is always watching, so no one has to be scared of the edge. It says, breathe and we'll count. So you breathe, and it counts. It counts the years of the paint. It counts the times the stairs were mopped. It counts the faces that lost their names here, but kept their rooms. You're a little afraid. How could you not be? Because to be kept is to be known, and to be known is sometimes like being seen in your oldest t-shirt. But the candle is steady, and the window is a square of cool on your forehead, and the moth lands on the wall just above your hand, like a stamp approving a letter that's going exactly where it should go. In the dream, you meet the house. It's not a person, and it's not a pile of wood. It's the feeling in a hand when it turns a doorknob after a very long day and stands on the threshold and says, that's over. It's the smell of warm dust when the heat first comes on. It's the particular click of your tongue when you're trying to think of a name, and it arrives, grinning, ready to be said. The house says, I noticed you because you noticed me. It says, not everyone does. It says, we could hum you easy to the end and back again if you want. You feel your dream mouth smile. In the morning, there is a second note beside the fruit bowl, written in the patient script, and you don't need to open it to know what it says, but you do anyway, because paper is meant to be unfolded. It says, you may leave your fear on the radiator. We'll keep it warm for you, and you can collect it in the daytime if you still need it. You laugh quietly. You put the note under the first note, so their corners align, a tiny roof. You cook eggs and they taste like remembering how to do something after months of forgetting. You take the loose thread you found and tie it in a small knot around the base of the candle, not as a spell, just as a thank you. The day has its errands again, its groceries like small trophies. When night returns, softer this time, you turn off the lights before the building asks. You lie down, and the mattress makes the old conversations you've been missing. The hum says the names again, and you add yours to the end, like a bead to a string. Somewhere above, water starts and stops. Somewhere below, someone sneezes, and someone else says bless you through a wall too thin for such kindness, and yet just right. You close your eyes and imagine leaving your fear on the radiator. You picture it like a damp scarf steamed dry and folded, ready if the wind insists. The candle breathes once and goes out. You do not reach for the matches. The moth is a comma that promises another clause. The house hums, you hum, the night hums, and the story moves on without needing you to follow. It will be here when you return. It will listen. If the dream has a door, you will leave it ajar. If morning has a threshold, you will cross it barefoot, wrist marked by the press of a cool oval that means you are kept, not taken. And if you wake afraid, you will touch the baseboard and count along, in, out, as the room counts with you, a found rhythm, a soft engine, a gentle, endless, watchful breath. You wake to a hush, so complete it sounds like snow. For a moment you can't tell if your eyes are open. The dark has the grain of velvet, and the room is a pocket you fit. Then the radiator offers a small courtly sigh, as if it is bowing to you, and you remember what you left there, fear, folded like a scarf. You reach toward the iron to make sure, and though there is no object to lift, the air above the fins is warm in a way that recognizes you. When you pull your hand back, the warmth clings for a heartbeat, a gentle return stamp. The building clears its throat. A pipe knocks far off. Not a threat, a pronunciation. The moth is on the window screen now, and the screen turns it into a constellation. Each square of wire, a little frame holding wings. I know, you say, because you do, or you almost do. You know that the house prefers soft speech and open palms. You know that listening is not passive. It is a door held wide by the shoulder. You know that sleep will come like a tide if you stop checking the clock and let the shoreline be. The hook catches you because it is not sharp at all. It is the promise that if something needs watching, it will be watched while you rest. You lie down and the pillow makes a shallow for your head, memory like sand under water smoothing itself. The hum begins, not at once but like a choir finding a key. You think for a bare second of all the apartments in the building, the closed eyes and open books, the spoons rinsed and set to dry, the shoes near doors. You wonder who the handwriting belongs to, whose careful rightward tilt keeps arriving like a tide note on your kitchen counter. You decide not to decide. The ceiling is a slow river. You float. The dream opens with an elevator that wasn't there before. The doors are brushed steel, and your reflection looks like a story told by someone kind. On the panel, there are more buttons than floors you've ever counted. B for basement, S for sub-basement, H for house, L for listening, and then the ordinary numbers dressed in their municipal font. You press L because your finger moves before your thought. The elevator does not rise or fall. It glides sidewise through a seam in the wall you'd never noticed. When the doors whisper open, you are not in your building exactly. You're in its idea. The corridors are a little longer, the air clear as a bell, and each door stands half ajar, as if no one wants anyone else to fumble in the dark. On the nearest knob, a card hangs. Please keep breathing. Your mind makes a small, happy sound. Another door's card reads, Quiet hours for pigeons 4:05 a.m. The next, Fern. Appreciated. Far ahead, where the hall kinks like an elbow, a figure sits on a step with a yellow legal pad. Their pencil moves with patient strokes. You know without needing to see the face that the handwriting will match. Hello, you say softly. Hello, the figure says, and the word arrives without a mouth, the way warmth arrives without a match. Do you take dictation? You ask because it suddenly matters whether the notes on your counter are being sent or received. The pencil pauses above the paper. We do exchange, the voice says. You leave breath. We return counting. You leave fear. We keep it until morning makes it small enough to carry again. We take lists too, if you have them. You realize you do. At once your palm is full of scraps of paper you didn't know you were holding. The names the hum murmured, Lenore Maha Silas Yara, a drawing of the moth that looks more like a leaf, a recipe for soup in your grandmother's handwriting that you haven't seen in years, the floor plan of your apartment with a little star where your thumb fits the windowsill groove. The pencil moves. We will keep these, the voice says, but not instead of you. Alongside, the elevator behind you waits with its doors open like a friend who does not urge. Far away, a door closes with a sound like a page turning. You wake with your hand touching the seam where your wall meets the floor, and the seam is warm, and your throat is not tired from speaking. The next day has the pleasant labor of gentle rearrangement. You find the one correct drawer for the tea strainers. You slide the couch to the left by the width of a book, and the room exhales. On your way down to check the laundry, you meet the woman from 4C again, umbrella as always, though the sky is the blue of plates. She tips her head. You slept, she says. Not a question. You nod. I made an arrangement, you say, and to your surprise, you are not embarrassed. She smiles with most of her face. The building likes contracts. They make it feel official, and official makes it feel safe. In the laundry room, the taped note still says, "The machine only eats dimes," and beneath that, in the neat hand, someone has added, "The house appreciates round things. They roll worries smooth." You feed dimes and listen to the chuff and shush of the drum. When you leave, you see that someone has drawn a little map on the corkboard, a treasure hunt with X marks on places the house tries to speak most clearly. The landing by the blocked-off window, the spot between the second and third stairs where the wood takes a breath, the far corner of the roof where pigeons practice landing. In the evening, after soup and news you do not need, you climb those stairs because it feels respectful. At each X, you pause. The Hume answers like a friend finishing your sentence. At the landing by the blocked window, you can smell clean stone, the kind that holds winter cool even in summer, and you understand it's been promised the company of ferns and never quite got it. You make a note. At the stair where the wood breathes, you rest your palm on the banister. It's the temperature of patience. The roof is a square of sky, and the pigeons perform their slow, competent gymnastics. One lands near your shoe and regards you. You regard it back. "I'll be quiet at your hour," you say, and the bird nods in the way pigeons always seem to nod, which looks like agreement even if it is only balance. When you come back down, the elevator that doesn't exist waits. You do not enter. It feels right to walk. Night lifts its lid gently. The room darkens like a deep breath. You light the candle and the wick remembers its new arrangement, flame rising with the small confidence of something that was not asked to do too much last time. The moth arranges itself above the baseboard like punctuation. The hum begins with consonants again, soft ones, like mem and n, in case any neighbors are new. You treat sleep the way you have begun to treat doors in this place. You don't shove. You lean until it opens on its own. That's when you hear the first footstep outside your apartment. Not the heavy, urgent kind that runs late. Not the squeak of sneakers, but a slow step, then a slower one, the pace of someone practicing being gentle on wood. The hallway light clicks. You don't sit up. If you sit up, the sound will develop edges. Instead, you put your hand on your stomach, palm warm through your shirt, and you say, inside your mouth, where words are cloudier, "I'm listening." The step stops as if nodding. A paper rustles against your door. There is the tiniest knock, the kind you'd use on a dollhouse. Then quiet. You count to 10 with the house. You count to 20. You get up because the story knows you will. On the mat there is a folded square of lined paper. You take it to the candle, aware that your own shadow is large now and kind. The note is brief, the hand precise. It says, "Would you like a plant?" There is no question mark, which you enjoy. The confidence of it, plant as offering, not inquiry. Beneath it, in the same hand, smaller, fern preferred, but ivy accepted if handoff requires negotiation. You smile, full, the kind that makes your cheeks ache a little, because you forget to do it often. You write back on the reverse. Fern will have a friend. You slide it under the door. The hallway breathes approval. The elevator does not ding. You return to bed, and the pillow has been holding your place like a courteous usher. You sleep. You dream a room made of sound. The walls are not walls, they are frequencies, bands of tone like silk ribbons. Low bass hum for foundation. Higher, lighter threads for windows. Somewhere, faint and steady, a metronome like a heartbeat laid on its side. When you reach out, the tones adjust under your hand the way a cat shifts to better accommodate your weight. You walk without your feet touching solvent ground because the ground is song. The pencil scratches somewhere, patient as tide. If I read back to you what you've said, the voice asks, will you recognize yourself? You nod. The ribbons tremble and speak in your own rhythms but softer. Thank you for listening. Please keep listening. The house would like to keep you. We sleep in shifts. Leave fear on the radiator. Fetch it after sunrise. Then, surprising and not unpleasant, another line not yet written anywhere. If you cannot sleep, it is not your fault. The night is only sometimes the right size. The words fold themselves around you like blankets. In the dream, someone sets a fern in the stairwell's cool, and the fern shakes like a dog after rain, light flinging itself from leaves. You check for the moth, and it is there, confident now, larger somehow, a cathedral window in miniature. You wake with leaves in your mind and the certain knowledge that morning will set you a small errand, soil, pot, a plant that thrives on the murmur of old pipes. Morning is in fact a list with checkboxes. You dress in that soft way you manage when a night has been kind, quiet limbs, the mild surprise of socks. The grocery person at the corner sells basil and rosemary in cheerful plastic sleeves, but the florist 3 blocks down has ferns, and when you ask for one that likes dim stairwells and water when you remember but not too needy, the florist nods as if you've described an old friend. This one listens, they say, and the joke is so perfectly in step with your life now that it feels like more than a joke. You carry the fern home like a guest. The building's front door opens for you before your key has finished turning. On the second landing, where the X was on the little map, you set the pot in the rectangle of light that isn't regular light, and you tilt the leaves just so, the way people tilt hats, until the angle becomes flattering. The fern sighs. You would swear to it. From above a step, the woman from 4C peers down, and the umbrella leans against the banister like a third person. Oh good, she says. It'll like that spot. We tried a ficus once. It wanted newsletters and gossip. Ficus are terrible for sleep. You laugh, and the laugh is a bead that slides onto the string of the hallway and stops exactly where it belongs. Back in your apartment, there's another note by the fruit bowl. This one smaller, as if the hand that wrote it wanted to tuck itself into your morning without insisting. It says, counting at 8 tonight, if that suits you. The pigeons declared a late practice. You nod as if someone can see you, because someone probably can, in whatever way the house sees. At 8, you say aloud, and your voice makes the room less empty than a radio would. Evening is an animal that knows its name. At 7:50, you brush your teeth because it feels like arriving clean to something matters. You straighten the blanket. You tell the radiator, I'm leaving fear with you now, and it replies with a single, affirmative tick like a grandfather nodding off in a favorite chair. At 8, the hum clears its throat, the way orchestras do before the first note, though there is no conductor but breath. You lie down, and the counting begins. In, 1. Out, 2. It isn't math as much as tide. The house counts with you, the way you would count for a child who's learning to trust the dark will not grow teeth. In, 3. Out. 4. The moth descends and sits on the headboard like a folded letter. The candle offers its little crown, and then, without drama, pinches itself out. In. 5. Out. 6. Somewhere a motorcycle passes, and the engine is simply another bass note in a song about surviving a day. It does not belong to threat, it belongs to weather. In. 7. Out. 8. You think, with the last thought you'll have for a while, that this is the kind of haunting you would sign for in ink. Then the thought goes slack as a rope just untied. The room takes watch. Your breath strolls along a fence and never catches. Late in the night, a rain begins, a real one this time, respectable and even, as if the sky received the memo about quiet hours and complied. You float near waking once, and you feel the house add the rain to its count, not loudly, not to brag, just to keep time, so you won't have to. There is a sense of others tucked inside the same ledger, an old man in 2A who snores like radio static, a teenager home late who removes their shoes at the door because this place has taught them something about tenderness, the woman from 4C whose umbrella is at rest now, ribs closed like a thought waiting for morning. The building is not lonely, neither are you. The moth's wings tilt and tilt back. The fern on the landing drinks with its mouth open. You are kept, not taken. You sleep as if the ocean has finally learned your name and says it each time the tide goes out, gentle, patient again. Morning is clear glass, no curtain, no dust. You wake with a sense that something has been rehearsed all night, and now the performance is beginning. The kettle gleams like it knows the cue. The fern leans in its stairwell corner as if bowing. The moth presses itself flat against the window screen like an emblem. The note by the fruit bowl is new. It says in the careful hand, "Rain is welcome, but puddles must be named." You laugh under your breath, already picturing the chalk marks you will make on the pavement, words you will give to water before the sun drinks it. You tuck the note under the others. The stack grows like an altar. The building is tender with morning noise. Someone runs a blender. Someone tunes a guitar, strings complaining, then agreeing. In the hallway, the umbrella woman passes again, this time without the umbrella, carrying a bag of lemons. She glances at you, eyes soft with shared secret, and says, "The house likes citrus. Sharp makes sweet stand taller." You nod, as though you've always known this. You find yourself buying an orange at the market just to peel it in your kitchen, letting the zest mist into the air like small fireworks. The hum seems to inhale. The moth shivers its wings. The day bends around the idea of preparation. Notebooks, pencils, chalk. You take them all. At dusk, the sky is bruised plum. Rain comes as the note promised. You step into it with chalk ready in your pocket, but chalk melts on wet concrete, so you use your finger, tracing names into the glimmering puddles. Lenore, Maha, Silas, Yara, each reflection holding a word until the water ripples and smudges it into sound. People pass with umbrellas, but no one interrupts. The building waits behind you, lit from within like a lantern. When you return, your shoes squeak on the stairs, and the hum greets you with a phrase almost like applause. The fern's leaves are beaded with drops that will not fall. That night, the note on your pillow is shorter than ever. Count backward tonight. You lie down. You listen. The house begins at 10, and you follow. 9, 8, 7. Each number is a step down into a pool, where the water is thick as velvet, each breath a rung on a ladder that descends into quiet. At 3, your chest loosens. At 2, your mouth forgets its shape. At 1, the hum takes over and keeps the count without you. The dream is a story. The house tells itself with you inside it. You are in the lobby, but the mailboxes are rivers, little brass doors opening on currents you could dip a hand into. Each envelope swims, fish-like, and carries messages without weight. You reach in, and instead of paper, you draw out a sound, your own laughter from years ago, a friend's shout across a field, your grandmother calling you in for supper. The sound sits in your palm like a coin. You drop it back, and the river accepts it. The moth glides above, slow, ceremonial. You are written here now, the building says. Not threatening, not claiming, just a statement like weather. You have been added to the ledger of nights. You wake before dawn, candle stub still upright, notes like folded wings on your counter. The radiator releases one last sigh before silence. The hum rests. It has done its shift. The keeping is complete. Through the window the sky is paling, and your breath is steady, even. No, dawn slides in like a soft hand opening curtains, and you wake already calm, as though the night has been washed and ironed and folded for you to wear. The stack of notes waits, patient, at the corner of the counter. This morning's edition is curious, a square of paper with only a single circle drawn, dark and even, as if made with a steady compass. No words, just the circle. You set it down, sip your tea, and notice how the moth lands within the circle of steam rising from your cup, wings trembling like a second signature. The day asks little of you. You wander into small errands, bread that smells of crust and comfort, soap in a paper wrapper, an old book with someone else's penciled margin notes. In the shop mirror, you catch your own eyes and realize you look rested in a way you haven't in months. The building is keeping its promise. When you return, the stairwell fern has unfurled a new leaf, bright as folded silk, and someone has tucked a ribbon at the pot's base. The ribbon matches none you own. The house gathers gifts for itself, or perhaps for you, through hands you may never see. That evening, the note is back, the circle again, but now two circles side by side, overlapping slightly. You turn the page this way and that, but there is no secret beneath, no ink bleeding through. Still, when you lie down, you understand. The counting is not in numbers tonight, but in shapes. The house hums a circle. You breathe into it. The sound returns, overlapping your breath, and the circles roll like coins across the dark until you cannot tell which is yours. Sleep takes you as quietly as water seeping through soil. The dream is the hall again, longer than ever, and every door is open. Inside each room, someone sleeps. Strangers, neighbors, selves you might have been. All of them breathing, all of them kept. At the end of the corridor, a tall window opens to sky, and in the glass you see not your reflection, but the moth's, larger now, its wings paneled like stained glass, glowing faintly as though the moon has taken residence inside. It lifts once, twice, then settles against the frame. Behind you, the sound of pencil scratching, steady, eternal. This is the archive, the house tells you. Each night added, each breath counted. We keep them until morning has the strength to hold them. You step closer, hand raised as if to touch the moth, and the dream ends like a candle going out, all at once but not unkind. You wake with the certainty that something has been written on your behalf, though your counter is bare. The radiator is warm, the fern stretches toward the stairwell light, and the city outside goes about its noise. You smile at the silence in your chest, the even rhythm of a kept heart. The hum lingers, softer in daylight, like a companion walking a few steps behind, so you don't feel alone. You understand now that the house does not haunt, it hosts. And tonight, and the night after, and the night after that, it will count with you, watch with you, keep you, not taken, only kept, until sleep arrives like the gentlest tide. Now, on to the next story. The sound circled the clearing, never settling in one place long enough to pin down. I held my breath until my ribs ached, and in that absence of air, I realized the trees themselves were leaning, listening. Each symbol cut into their bark seemed to tremble faintly, as if remembering what it had been carved to hold. He knows you're here, she murmured, but he can't enter unless you invite him. The idea sounded absurd, like something out of a campfire story told to frighten children, and yet, standing inside the ring of carved trunks, I believed her. The air was thicker here, charged, like standing beneath a storm that hadn't chosen where to strike. He said the forest chose me, I whispered back. Her eyes flicked toward the stone. It did, but not only for him. The breath sound deepened, stretched into syllables almost too low to catch. My name carried in pieces. I felt it in the soil more than I heard it. The hair on my arms prickled as if each pore were listening. What happens if I answer? Her grip on my arm tightened. Then you stay, and the woods keep you the way they keep him, bound to hunger, bound to night. The voice slid closer, brushing the edge of the clearing, like an animal testing a fence. You don't have to be afraid, it said, soft and coaxing, the cheer back in its cadence. I can show you the old paths. I can teach you their names. For a moment, exhaustion tempted me to let go, to be guided, to stop fighting. My knees bent as if the ground itself had leaned toward me. She pulled me upright, sharp as a spark. Don't listen long, she hissed. That's how he thins you out. What do I do? My voice was a rasp, barely sound at all. She stepped to the stone at the center, laying both hands on its surface. The tether can be broken, but it takes more than one voice. It takes someone who hasn't given themselves over. I don't understand. You don't have to. Her eyes caught mine, bright and unblinking. You just have to repeat after me. The voice beyond the trees laughed, low and knowing. The branches creaked as though something heavy leaned on them from above. Hurry, she said. He's calling the forest in closer. I stepped to the stone, palms clammy, heart hammering. She began to speak, a string of words that didn't belong to any language I knew. Soft, rounded syllables that seemed to resonate with the carved lines on the stone. The symbols brightened faintly, drinking moonlight until they glowed. Say it, she urged, and I did, stumbling over the rhythm, but the stone accepted the words anyway. The ground vibrated like a drumbeat underfoot. From the tree line came a hiss, furious and sudden, as if the woods themselves had drawn breath through clenched teeth. Shadows thickened, writhing between the trunks, but the line of carved symbols held. Again, she shouted, louder now, voice rising to meet the hum beneath the earth. We spoke together, the clearing answering in light. The stone's grooves blazed white, and the air tasted of iron and rain. Beyond the trees, the man's voice twisted into something not human at all. You don't know what you're breaking, it snarled. You think you can walk away, but the trail doesn't end. It only waits. The woman gritted her teeth, her hands pressed flat to the stone. Once more, she said, and her voice cracked but didn't falter. I shouted the words, throat raw. The stone flared, and for an instant the clearing was daylight. The shadows at the tree line shrieked and folded inward, tearing like cloth in fire. His voice stretched thin, then snapped, swallowed by silence. The forest stilled. The air lightened. My breath came back to me in ragged pulls. She slumped against the stone, eyes shut, shoulders trembling. It's done. I waited for the woods to contradict her. None did. Only the sound of leaves easing back into themselves, no longer leaning. What happens now? I asked, afraid of the answer. She opened her eyes slowly. Now you leave. Tonight. Don't look back, no matter what you hear. If you stay until dawn, the trail will claim you. And you? Her expression was weary, but resolute. I made my choice a long time ago. Someone has to keep the tether from knotting again. I shook my head, words failing me. Gratitude, grief, disbelief, they all tangled. She smiled faintly, a tired kindness. Go, she said. So I did. I turned from the stone, from her, from the faint glow, dying into bark, and stepped back into the forest that seemed for the first time not to be listening, but as I walked, fast and clumsy, branches catching my sleeves. I heard one last sound, so soft I might have imagined it, a footstep, measured and patient, falling in time with mine, the trail, reminding me it was still there, and it was waiting. The path ahead was pale with moonlight, though I didn't remember it being this open before. My legs carried me forward, half stumbling, half flying, while my chest burned with each breath. Behind me the clearing had gone silent, but the silence wasn't ordinary. It pressed at my back, urging me to move faster, as if the woods themselves were holding still to see if I would dare to stop. I kept my eyes forward. She told me not to look back. My mind replayed her words, brittle and bright. If you stay until dawn, the trail will claim you. Each repetition was a lash across my thoughts, keeping me awake, keeping me moving. The forest stretched and folded. I passed the same crooked birch more than once, its trunk scarred with lightning, but each time it leaned at a slightly different angle. My sense of direction thinned until it was a thread about to snap. Still, I pressed on. The trail beneath my boots was narrow, but it carried the weight of countless footsteps before mine. A sound followed, not footsteps this time, but breathing, not close, not far, just behind, steady and patient. My chest clenched. I refused to look back. Instead, I whispered into the dark, not knowing who might hear. I'm leaving. I don't belong to this. The woods gave no answer, but the breathing paused, then resumed, closer. I broke into a run. Branches clawed at my arms and legs, tearing skin, catching fabric. The moon bobbed above like a lantern, carried by someone who didn't care if I kept up. Roots snagged my boots. I fell once, hard, and my palms burned from catching the earth. The breathing caught up, a warmth at the nape of my neck. I shoved myself upright and sprinted until my throat screamed. The trees thinned without warning. Suddenly I was at the edge of a ravine, black water at the bottom glimmering faintly. A single rotting log stretched across, narrow as a coffin lid. On the far side, the trail gleamed with a light that didn't belong to the moon. My body wanted to collapse. My mind wanted to hide. But the breathing was right behind me, patient as hunger. I set my foot on the log. It groaned. My weight made it shudder. The water below whispered and curled, shape-shifting just beneath the surface. As though waiting, I fixed my eyes on the far side, refusing to look down. One step, another. My arms spread wide. My breath came shallow, a thread of smoke. Halfway across, the log lurched. Something pressed against it from beneath, like a hand lifting. I nearly fell, arms pinwheeling, and in that wild second, I heard his voice, low and amused. The woods aren't done with you. I gritted my teeth and lunged, a desperate leap. My boots struck dirt on the far side. I rolled, gasping, skin scraped raw. The log cracked behind me. With a sound like bones splitting, it collapsed into the ravine. The water closed over it without a ripple. Silence again. The glowing trail waited ahead. It bent around a rise, pale and promising. My legs trembled, but I forced them on. At the crest, the trees opened like curtains. The forest ended, sudden as a door slammed wide. Before me stretched the road I had left at dusk, its gravel silver in the moonlight, stretching toward the horizon where dawn already hinted with the faintest gray. I staggered forward, unwilling to believe. The breathing did not follow. No footsteps, no voice, no weight pressing in. Only the trail behind me, dark and waiting. I didn't stop, not until my boots met the asphalt of the road, not until the first smear of sunlight touched the treetops and painted the forest in a new, indifferent light. That's when I turned. The woods stood ordinary again, green and hushed, as if nothing had ever happened. No man, no woman, no stone, no tether, but just beyond the first line of trees, on the shadowed dirt, a moth the size of my hand rested on the ground. Its wings opened once, slow as breathing, and though I was already on the road, already in the day, the sound that reached me was the forest's quiet murmur, steady, patient, endless. We wait, we keep, we count. I walked faster, not daring to run, until the woods were a smear in the rear view of my mind. But even as the sky turned gold, I knew the trail hadn't ended. It had only let me go for now. I walked until the sun was well above the horizon, its heat drying the sweat and rain still clinging to my skin. The road was empty. No cars, no houses, no sign of anyone else. Just the long ribbon of gravel stretching forward, pale as bone. My body begged me to stop, to curl into the ditch and close my eyes, but every time I slowed, I felt it, the weight of the forest at my back, leaning in, listening. By noon, I reached a crossroads marked by a rusted signpost. Its lettering was too faded to read, but one arm pointed toward a cluster of rooftops in the distance. Civilization, relief should have swept over me, but instead unease stirred. The rooftops looked wrong, angles too sharp, shadows too deep, as if the buildings leaned like the trees had. I blinked, and the vision softened into something ordinary, a small town, quiet and sunlit. I told myself I was imagining things, exhaustion, nerves. I turned toward it. The streets were empty when I arrived, the air oddly still. Curtains hung limp in windows, though no breeze stirred them. Doors stood shut, but not locked. The first house I tried yielded to a gentle push, the hinges sighing as though I'd been expected. Inside smelled of dust and wood smoke, but there were no footprints in the dust, no dishes in the sink, no trace of life at all. Room after room was the same, tidy, silent, abandoned. I backed out into the street, heart hammering. Maybe everyone had left. Maybe there was a festival or a gathering beyond the ridge. But the longer I walked, the clearer it became. The town wasn't empty because people had left. It was empty because no one had ever truly lived here. The houses were shells, the streets too perfect, the silence staged. The forest had let me out. Yes, but it had built the place waiting for me. A sound broke the hush, the low, steady hum. I thought I'd escaped. It came from beneath the ground, a vibration through the soles of my boots, rising into my bones. I turned in a slow circle. Every window now seemed like an eye. Every doorway seemed ajar by a fraction, waiting. Then I saw it, in the center of the town square, a stone slab broad as a table, carved with the same curling lines I'd seen in the tethered clearing. Sunlight should have washed the carvings pale, but they glowed faintly, drinking the day. On its surface lay a piece of paper, square and folded. I approached slowly, each step heavier than the last. The hum deepened, pleased. My fingers shook as I picked up the paper and unfolded it. In neat, careful handwriting it read, "You can leave your fear here. We will keep it until night." The same words, the same promise. The wind shifted. The trees at the edge of town stirred as if they had leaned closer again. And from one of the empty houses behind me came the sound of a door gently closing. Not slamming, not forced, just closing, as if someone who had been waiting inside had finally stepped out. I clutched the note, heart racing. The trail hadn't released me, it had only widened. The town was part of the forest, and the forest was still keeping me. The door that closed echoed too long, as though the sound had been stretched thin over every empty street. I turned, slow as frost spreading, and saw movement in the corner house. Curtains swayed, though no wind touched them. A shadow passed behind the glass, not sharp like a person, but blurred, as if the walls themselves had breathed. I backed toward the square. The note in my hand trembled with me, though its letters stayed steady, patient. "You can leave your fear here." The stone slab waited. Its carvings pulsed faintly, like veins under skin. I didn't want to obey, but the longer I clutched the note, the heavier it grew. until it seemed my wrist was dragging a chain. Against every instinct, I placed the paper on the slab. At once the hum deepened. The weight in my chest loosened, as if invisible hands had lifted something from me. My breath came easier. My shoulders dropped. For the first time since the clearing, I wasn't afraid. Then I realized the absence of fear didn't feel like freedom. It felt like vacancy. A hollow where something necessary had been scooped out. Steps sounded in the dust behind me. Not hurried, not hunting, just steady, deliberate, moving closer. I turned. The man stood at the far end of the square. Same patched coat, same weathered face, same smile tugged wrong at the edges. His eyes caught the sunlight, but didn't reflect it. "You made good time," he said pleasantly. "The trail runs faster when it knows who it wants." My throat was dry. I left. I broke it. He tilted his head, amused. "You broke a tether, not the tether. Did she tell you that?" The woman's face flashed in my mind, the ash on her cheek, the weariness in her voice. I realized she hadn't promised freedom, only delay. "She helped me escape," I said. His smile widened a fraction. "Did she? Or did she bring you here?" He gestured at the silent houses, the empty windows. "This place is for those who resist. A second path, a gentler snare. You'll see. The quiet is honest here, too." The hum rose, steady and comforting, pressing against my bones the way a lullaby does. My fear was gone, stripped away, and with it the urgency to run. My limbs felt heavy, rooted. He walked closer, slow as dusk settling. "Rest now. The forest has you, and you'll never have to be alone again." At the edge of the square, something moved between the houses. Figures, dozens of them, pale and blurred. Not people, not exactly. Shapes of those who had stayed. Their heads turned toward me in perfect unison. The man stopped a few paces away, eyes bright with hunger that wasn't hunger at all. "The woods keep what they're given. And now," he said softly, "so do you." The figures stepped forward. I tried to scream, but with no fear in me, the sound had no edge. It came out flat, swallowed at once by the waiting hush. The square darkened, though the sun still stood above. The hum filled everything, and the trail, patient as ever, opened its mouth beneath my feet. I didn't fall so much as tilt, like a coin deciding which face to show. The square tilted with me. The stones slid sideways. The houses leaned without moving. For a second, the world was a plate, lowered onto a table, not quite level. The air thickened. The hum pressed up through my soles, through my bones, and into the soft of my mouth, so that my tongue wanted to lie still and agree. If fear had been in me, it would have flared, sparking the muscles in my legs. But I had set it down on the slab, like a courteous guest, and the town, pleased, had tidied it away. Without fear there was no flight, and without flight there was only staying. The figures in the nearest alley were clearer now. Faces not wrong, exactly, but incomplete, as if whoever had carved them had run out of time at the cheeks. Their eyes were the color of placeholders. They moved like words filling blank lines. The man watched me with his small, careful smile. "There, better," he said softly. "No need to run. Running is for people with sharp edges left." He lifted a hand toward the center of the square, gesturing for me to step closer to the slab that had made a hollow of me. "Come, you'll find it easier if you don't resist. The woods always prefer agreement." A moth drifted between us, low to the ground, wings paper pale in daylight. It veered toward the slab and then toward me, then climbed and vanished in a glare of roof tile. The movement broke something small in my chest. Not fear, but the memory of it, the echo of the way it had braced my body. I thought of the clearing where the woman had steadied my arm. I thought of the way her voice had anchored the words on the stone. I thought of the log cracking and the water closing over it without ripple, patient as a mouth. Where did you put it? I asked, surprising myself with the sound of my voice. He blinked, still smiling. What? My fear, I said. You said the woods keep what they're given. Where did you put it? His smile bent. Kept is kept, he said. You don't need to know where. You only need to know that it's not your problem anymore. I shook my head as if I could straighten the tilted world with a refusal. The hum flowed up into the refusal and smoothed it. I imagined reaching for panic and found a shelf where something had been. The woman's words came back like a hand on my shoulder, not pulling, just insisting I remember the shape of motion. It takes more than one voice. I want it back, I said, plain. I left it. I want it back. The figures paused as if someone had pressed a finger to a page. The man's eyes thinned, not with anger. Anger would have been relief, because it would have made him ordinary, but with a patience that told me he had stood in squares like this and said lines like these more times than I could count. You're tired, he said, the way a parent speaks to a child, overdue for sleep. When you've rested, you'll be grateful for what's been taken from you. No need to carry weight that the woods can carry better. He stepped closer. The hum thickened. The closest house shifted its shadow like a body adjusting under a blanket. When you set your fear down, he said, you agreed to be kept. It wasn't theft. It was courtesy. It's better this way, for everyone. Behind him, the town watched with its many unblinking windows. At the edge of the square, a breeze tried to pick up and failed. The leaves of a single sapling turned one side to the sun and then the other, as if practicing choices. I want it back, I said again, even though wanting without fear felt like asking for salt when you couldn't remember the taste. Saying it helped. It raised a small sharpness. It made my throat a hinge instead of a pipe. The woman's voice, not here, not now, seemed to answer in my head. Name the thing you mean, or the woods will name it for you. I closed my eyes. The hum thickened its hands on my shoulders, as if to ease me down. With my eyes shut, the square was a pressure map, stone like a cool palm, houses like sleeping animals, the man like a wire pulled taut and smiling. In the blank behind my lids, I pictured the slab as I'd left it, the folded note, the neat hand, the gentleness of the words masquerading as mercy. I pictured the place in me where fear had sat, low, somewhere under my ribs, a small useful animal. I said its name, not fear, which is a category, not terror, which is weather. The name I gave it was the first time my body had known to run, the yell in my chest when a dog broke its rope and lunged, when I was 8 and my knee was opened by gravel, the exact temperature of air I had breathed crouched under a desk while a storm rearranged the world outside the school, the ache when a phone didn't ring that should have, the heat that crosses cheekbones when a stranger steps too close and calls it politeness. I gave the small animal its proper name. I told the woods where it lived in me and what it did. Something shifted. The hum faltered, briefly like an organist slipping a finger. The man's face tilted, the smile tightening until it was almost a line. Careful, he said softly. The woods are listening. I know, I said, and I reached for the slab. It was farther than my arm, but not farther than my voice. When I opened my eyes, the carvings were brighter, the lines refusing sunlight and making their own. I stepped forward, 1 pace, 2, expecting heaviness to thicken the air to a jelly. I'd have to push through. Instead, the ground came level under my feet, as if the square had decided to indulge me for a moment. The figures in the alleys stepped in unison, closer. Their mouths were almost mouths. I could see now that each wore something that had meant something to someone. A scarf knitted badly, a cap with a patch from a place too small to be a brand, a cuff with 3 missing buttons. The man watched me move the way I'd watched the log, interested, amused at the illusion of choice. Bring it back, I told the slab. You kept it kindly. I left it through trickery. I understand now. Bring it back. My hand touched the stone. Cold climbed my palm and wrist, not unpleasant but exact. The carved lines weren't just lines, they were channels, and something moved in them like water deciding to be metal. The note I'd unfolded earlier was gone. In its place was a darkened square where the paper had rested, as if the slab had drunk the idea of it. I pressed my fingers to that square. The hum swelled. Approval, warning, and then stuttered as I said the small animal's true name again. It rushed into me. There was no ceremony, no halo, no great shout. There was only the sensation of something stepping across a threshold and finding its corner inside my chest, as if it had been kept warm, as if it had not been hungry while it waited. My knees loosened. My hands shook. Sweat whisked out along my spine. The world sharpened. The figures sharpened with it, resolving while they moved, as if seeing them made them real. The sun gained a point. The square flattened to a square. The man's smile became teeth. Ah, he said, as if I had confirmed a familial trait he'd suspected. There you are. I almost ran then. Fear does that. It puts a hand on your back and pushes. But the woman's voice, hers not my invention of it, as if the town had a place where echoes gather, threaded through the hum like a narrow road. Don't listen long. Don't speak to me, I told the man. Speak to the woods. If they keep what they're given, let them keep this conversation and leave me out of it. He laughed. It wasn't a bad sound. It was almost kind. You think they're separate? The woods, the trail, the town, they are only as separate as your hands from your arms. He lifted his own hand, palm up, and a scatter of leaves stirred at the edge of the square, as if to applaud. I stepped back from the slab. The carvings dimmed slightly, deprived of my touch. The figures moved closer. I could see their eyes now, and the way they avoided focus. I could see the cuffs and the buttons, and a ring that looked carved from bone, and I had to hold my teeth together so my fear didn't run me like a horse. What do you want? I asked. Honest, no rehearsal. The man's gaze flicked to the houses and back, amused. He put his hands in his coat pockets, and for a moment he looked like any person on any winter street, deciding whether to address a stranger. I want what the woods want, he said, to be fed, to be remembered, to be the path people take when they are tired of being alone. I want to make it easy. Easy is how you keep them, I said. Easy is how we keep you, he corrected gently. I turned my shoulder toward him so that if the square tried to tilt again, I'd have enough balance to fall toward the street that led out and not toward the alleys where the figures waited. The fear in me nested and lifted its head and simply looked. The looking steadied me better than calm ever had. When does it end? I asked, not expecting truth. The man glanced toward the far ridge where the road sloped out of town. It ends the way rivers end, he said. They become something bigger and keep moving. You're stuck, I said. Sudden, the idea arriving whole. You're bound to it. You can't leave unless someone invites you over a threshold. That's why you wanted the words. He didn't flinch. His face was a habit, not a face, but something around him tightened, like thread between 2 points. Everyone is bound to something, he said. This is better than most. Behind him, between 2 houses, a sliver of shade shivered. The woman stepped out of it, or the shape of her. Her hair was pulled back. The ash was still on her cheek. Her hands were empty, which made me think of the stone. Her eyes met mine, and then cut past me to the slab. Brief, quick, a suggestion only. It takes more than one voice. Another moth crossed between us and the sun, casting a shadow the size of a coin on the stone. The fear in me recognized the moth. I don't know how. I only knew that moths, for all their whispering wings, are greedy for light and die of it all the time, and that bravery is sometimes only the name we give to a creature's bad mouth. I'm not staying, I said. If the woods want to be remembered, they can be remembered by someone who walks away. The man sighed. Small. They don't like that, he said. You forget, and forgetting is a kind of starvation. The figures in the alleys took another step. They were near enough that their breath, if they had breath, would have suffered the dust between us to move. The hum rolled under us like a drum line in a parade, certain and relieved. I stepped back. My heel brushed the carved edge of the slab, and the stone reminded my skin of water. Say it, the woman said. Her voice wasn't a whisper. It wasn't anything as sharp as sound, but it moved through me like a seed through a beak. What? I said too loud, and the man's eyes brightened at the panic in it. The name you gave, she said, the one that brought it back. If the first naming had been a key, the second felt like turning it in a lock. The hum rushed, sensing change, and the figures leaned like trees listening. I put my hand flat on the stone again, and the cold climbed, grateful. I said the small animal's name, not into the air this time, but into the channels carved where other people's palms had rested. I said it on the outbreath. I said it like a person stepping onto a log that will hold just long enough. The slab answered. I don't know how else to tell it. The lines brightened, the stone thrummed, the hum faltered. The man's mouth thinned. The closest house shifted, irritated, and for a second I saw the teeth where its windows were. Again, the woman said, louder. I spoke it to the town. I spoke it to the road. I spoke it to the ravine, and the log, and the water that had closed over it, like a lesson. I spoke it to the tree with lightning scars, and to the sapling practicing choices. The fear in me stepped to the front of my chest and leaned out like a person on a balcony. The square tried to tilt. I adjusted my feet. The figures stuttered, as if something in their knees had been expected to lock and had loosened instead. One of them, gray hair, long braid, someone's shirt, worn soft under someone else's jacket, lifted a hand uncertainly and then lowered it, as if that too had been written and then crossed out. The man took a step toward me. Finally, his pupils were wide and the bright was gone from his eyes. That's enough, he said, polite as a teacher ending game. You're awake now, it's over. Come sit. You'll like it when you don't have to hold yourself up anymore. Let them choose, I said, and with my free hand I pointed at the figures, because pointing made me shaky and stubborn. Ask and wait for the answer. You want to be kept? So do they, but not by you. It's not a democracy, he said, and his smile became what it always had been, merely the mouth he had been given to do a job. Then it can be a theft, I said, and fear sharpened my words into something the hum couldn't smooth. And stolen things are carried awkwardly, and you drop them if someone runs in the right direction. The woman's shape nodded, almost invisible now in the slip of alley shade. The moth lowered and landed on the slab near my hand. Its wings opened and closed. Powder dusted my skin. Say it one more time, she said, then run. I put my palm hard to the stone, leaned my weight into it, as if it were the shoulder of a friend boosting me over a fence, and I said the name of the small animal as if it were the truest name I owned. The slab flared white. The hum broke. The figures startled like starlings at a window. The man flinched. It was small, but it was there, a reflex. I ran. Fear took my elbow like a competent ant and hustled me through the square, past the stone, past the careful handwriting I'd returned to myself, past the houses with their placeholder eyes. The man called something, my name, or the name the woods had picked when I wouldn't choose, and the syllables chased me through the dust, catching my heels. I didn't answer. I didn't look back. The road out of town rose before me, like a slope to a place where air is thinner and hope is needed for lungs, and I climbed it with my arms and with my teeth. The square behind me adjusted itself. It didn't tilt this time. It sank. The hum tried to stand up under me and persuade my knees to fold. Fear shoved it down. The woman didn't appear beside me. She didn't call out. She didn't wave. Her absence was her gift. She stayed where thresholds knot, keeping them from remembering how to tangle. The moth flew ahead of me, a pale scrap, hopping from shadow to shadow, an idiot lantern the day itself could barely see. I followed the idiot lantern because sometimes you let a tiny dumb thing lead you when the big smart things would hand you over at a door and call it hospitality. At the edge of town, the trees waited. In the early afternoon, their leaves showed their light sides, and then their dark, the way a field does when wind runs across it. The woods weren't pretending to be something else anymore. They were wood and leaf, and old soil, and the idea of hunger braided through roots. As I passed the last house, something inside it sighed. It wasn't disappointment. It wasn't approval. It was the sound walls make when they've held their breath and remember how to breathe. I stepped under the first branch, and I did not slow. The trail was the trail again. It didn't glow. It didn't open a mouth. It didn't sing. It lay there, worn and narrow, with the prints of boot soles and animal pads, and wheels impressed in it, where the dirt held its memory. The air was cooler, and my skin cooled with it, and the small animal behind my ribs lifted its face and sniffed. Somewhere behind, something moved parallel to me, not following, not leading. The woods had not forgiven or abandoned. They had simply changed their posture, not leaning in, not receding, checking, the way a person checks a lock after closing a door, not suspicious, not nervous, only sure. I walked until my legs learned it again. I walked until sunlight found the floor of the forest and made coins of it here and there, and smaller moths, simple ones, the size of thumbnails, wobbled through the coins on their own errands. I walked until the sound of water came, thread thin and tireless. It was not the ravine. It was a trickle making its way through stones, because all water once is down. I knelt and drank from my palms, the way you do when you can't see how deep something is and don't care. The cold lived in my teeth and made them honest. When I stood, a shadow stepped out onto the trail ahead, and I thought for a second it was him, but it was a deer, narrow and lithe, its ribs faint under its fur, its ears turned toward me as if I were a remark it was deciding whether to agree with. We looked at each other. I held still. The small animal under my ribs did not tell me to run from the deer. This was useful knowledge. The deer gave a small nod. Ridiculous, because animals don't nod. They signal and then stepped off the path into the underbrush with the confidence of a thing that has always known where to put its feet. I kept going. The trees leaned, sometimes, but not because they were listening. They leaned because wind had taught them a certain angle, and they kept it. The trail forked, and then forked again, and at each split, I chose the way that didn't feel like a decision someone else had made for me. I said the small animal's name when tiredness made my feet lazy, and when a crow called and sounded like a person. I said it when the light threaded itself with gold, and when shadows became longer than the objects that made them. As evening slid in, the forest thinned. The trees became less like a cathedral and more like people standing far apart at a bus stop. The first sound of a car reached me from very far away, a ribbon of engine unwinding on asphalt somewhere beyond the hill. I climbed. The moth, if it had been the same one, I couldn't know, was gone. The idiot lantern of day was enough. At the top of the slope, the land opened. The road I'd left the night before lay below, ordinary and even boring. A fence ran along it, and a ditch and a brown sign pointing toward a town with a name that had nothing to do with the square I'd left behind. On the fence hung scraps of ribbon and string, where hikers had tied markers to remember their way. Some were new, some had faded to colorless threads. One had a button threaded through it, 3 holes, one empty. I stepped over the fence and my boot sank half an inch into the shoulder of the road. Gravel pressed its signature into my soul. A truck passed, slowing when the driver saw me, hand lifted in a wave. I lifted my hand back and felt the human weight of it. the way a wave from one stranger to another creates a bridge just big enough to carry one person over. I walked toward the sign. A mile marker announced the distance to a town with a diner. When I reached it, the only other customer was a man in a cap reading a paper with photographs that were too glossy to be true. The waitress set water in front of me and didn't ask questions she didn't need answers to. I ordered food that came hot, and for the first time in longer than a day, I tasted something that wasn't metal. When I left cash under the lip of the bill, the waitress slid a small paper napkin toward me. On it, in neat, careful handwriting, were 4 words: "Count forward tonight." "Please." I looked up. She had already turned to the coffee maker, as if she had nothing to do with notes, or with woods, or with anything but the next cup. The napkin was the kind they buy by the thousand, thin, ready to fold or tear. The handwriting wasn't hers. Of course it wasn't. The careful slant was older than anyone in the diner. I took the napkin with me. At the motel, I locked the door and wedged a chair under the knob, because people do that in stories, and sometimes stories are manuals. I showered until the water ran cool. I turned out the light and lay on top of the coverlet, because the bedspread had forgotten what soap felt like sometime around the year the television had been mounted. My heart beat in my chest with its old rhythm, unremarkable. The napkin waited on the nightstand beside the remote that did not belong to this television. I wasn't sure sleep would come. Fear, even when it is small and useful, is an animal with its own ideas about when to stalk and when to curl. But the woods had taught me another thing too, a thing that belonged to the woman's voice, and to the stone, and to the way counting made the air visible. I counted forward, not like the house that had wanted me to sleep by obedience, not like the town that wanted me to lay selections on its clean slab. I counted like walking. Each number was a step that was mine to place. 1 was a door opening, 2 was a road, 3 was a white line down the center of it, chipped and repainted. 4 was the sound of tires on gravel, acceptable as rain. 5 was a fence with ribbons. 6 was a moth that did not love the light enough to die of it. 7 was a woman with ash on her cheek who chose to stay and keep the knot loose. 8 was a stone that isn't magic unless hands remember that words are heavier than they look. 9 was a log that broke because very old things do not hold forever if asked to. 10 was a town with a different name. I reached the end of my counting and I started again, not because the first set hadn't worked, but because I liked the way the numbers made a path I could lay my body along. When sleep came, it did not take me the way the square had opened its mouth. It did not keep me the way the trail had tried to keep me. It came like a person who agrees to sit in the chair by the door for the first shift while I rest, and then wake me when it's my turn. And if I don't wake on time, it doesn't mind. It will wait. It will count. I dreamed, and in the dream, the forest was a place with boundaries. It was large, and it wanted what large things want. It did not stop because I asked, but the path through it was bright enough for my feet. At the far end of the path, someone stood, hair pulled back, hands empty. She wasn't a saint. She wasn't a trap. She was a person who had chosen a hard job, and she was doing it, and that was all. As I passed, she said nothing, and in the not saying was the same blessing as a hand cupped under a heel, helping you over a fence. I woke at dawn. Light on the motel curtains made a pale door. My body was the kind of heavy that means sleep did its work. In my chest, the small animal slept with one ear up. I looked at the napkin in the careful hand. I folded it and put it in my pocket and did not leave it on any slab. When I checked out, the cashier asked if I wanted a receipt. Yes, I said, because paper keeps a shape sometimes. Back on the road, the day was the sort you don't tell stories about because it does not need one. I drove. I stopped and bought coffee that was not good and was perfect. At an intersection, a crow stood in the street and refused to move until I honked, and when it finally flew, it did it slowly on purpose to make a point. In my rear view, the green at the horizon was just green. Sometimes, when I am far from any tree at all, and the night is a lid with no holes, I hear it again, the counting that isn't mine. Sometimes, when exhaust fans hum, I feel the square threaten to tilt. And sometimes, when I am tired, a note in neat, careful hand appears, where it has no right to be. A dry cleaning ticket, the back of a receipt, the paper placemat at a diner. The words are always patient. The invitation is always polite. The woods still prefer agreement. I carry my fear in my pocket with the napkin. I have learned to pat it as if it were a wallet or a key. I have learned that when I set it down, even kindly, I am not lighter. I am only easy to lift. There are paths that go on without us and count us anyway. There are houses that hum us to sleep and keep watch and do not ask for anything but the sound of breath. There are trails that wait with their mouths closed until we step on them, and when we do, they open and say we are home. I keep walking. If the forest wants to be remembered, I remember it without going back. If the town wants to keep what it's given, I give it my absence and see whether it can hold that. The woman keeps her post and knots and unknots, and I keep mine, a life that exists in daylight, where fear is allowed to sit at the table and say when to get up. At night I count forward. I do not always make it to 10. Sometimes I make it only to 2. Sometimes I climb to 100 because roads are long and it helps to name them. The moths come to the window and describe their soft, useless circles, and I do not let them in. When I sleep, the woods stand where they stand, and the trail waits where it waits, patient, endless. I wake, and if morning has a threshold, I cross it with fear in my pocket, a napkin folded small, and a promise to myself that if I ever set anything on a stone again, I will know exactly what it is, and I will expect to miss it. On the first rainy day after, a puddle formed under the dent in my building's back lot. I stood over it with a piece of chalk and a stupid idea. I named it. I wrote a word that didn't mean anything to anyone but me. It lasted until a delivery truck smeared it into colorless arcs, and then until the sun took all of that too. Naming it didn't keep it, but for the hours the word clung to water, I saw in the reflection a face I recognized. The woods want what they want, so do I. When it is my turn to keep watch, I keep it. When it is my turn to rest, I rest. When the hum comes up through the floor, I listen, and then I count out loud, forward, once, twice, 3 times, until the number becomes a road I can walk, until the night is the right size for me and not the other way around. If something knocks very lightly at the door, a hand the size of a moth's wing, a voice the size of a pencil scratch, I do not answer. I let it count alongside me until it gets bored, or until it remembers that I was not promised, I was only asked. If I wake afraid, I do not set it down. I smooth it the way you smooth a paper, so it will fit in a pocket. I say its name. I breathe. The woods, somewhere, keep counting. The town keeps its square polished and its slab engraved. Someone with ash on her cheek stands where the alley meets the light and learns the new knots as they form. And I, stubborn as a sapling in the wrong wind, keep walking the only trail that was ever mine. We wait, we keep, we count, but I count for me, and in that small arithmetic there is a kind of ending the woods cannot use. Now, on to the next story. The first sign wasn't the smell, though that came later, thick and metallic, like pennies pressed into the back of your tongue. The first sign was the mirror. It was an ordinary morning, pale light through blinds, the drip of the bathroom faucet that never sealed right, the hollow quiet of a house too small for echoes. I leaned over the sink to brush my teeth, and the mirror fogged in the middle, though the shower hadn't run yet. A patch of condensation, the size of my palm, shaped like a hand pressed from the other side. I wiped it with the towel. The mark returned before my hand dropped back to my side. People tell themselves what they need. Pipes breathing, temperature shifts, an old house doing what old houses do. I told myself all of that, even while my pulse turned into a drum. I told myself again later, when I left for work and saw the same handprint in the rearview mirror of my car, blurred but deliberate, as if it had pressed there from inside the glass. The day went about itself. Screens, conversations, coffee gone cold before the last sip, but every reflective surface carried a trick of it. The chrome of the elevator, the darkened phone screen, the glass door at the office, always just faint enough to question, always too precise to ignore. By evening, I didn't want to turn the lights on in the apartment. Darkness is dishonest, yes, but light makes reflections. I sat at the kitchen table with only a candle. That's when the smell arrived. Iron and earth, wet copper and smoke. The flame guttered in its dish. From the corner of the room, the mirror over the sideboard breathed. The surface flexed almost imperceptibly, as if it had lungs. I should have left. I should have smashed it, or prayed, or both. Instead, I whispered, not knowing why. I see you. The glass rippled. Something darker than dark shifted behind it, too broad for the frame, too patient for hunger. And a voice like two voices speaking at once answered, low, almost amused, good, then we can begin. The mirror did not speak again that night, but it did not leave. Wherever I walked in the apartment, its surface seemed to turn by a fraction, like a pupil tracking motion. My candle burned low, drowning the room in orange. When it finally guttered, I sat in the dark and watched the faint outline of the frame become a square of heavier black in all that blackness, an absence inside an absence. Sleep, when it came, felt like slipping backward, not a descent, but a slow tilting into a deeper version of the room. I woke to the click of the bathroom fan, even though it wasn't on. I woke to the sound of water arguing quietly with the pipes. When I opened my eyes, the mirror over the sideboard was no longer on the wall. It stood opposite the bed where the closet should have been, as if I'd moved it there sometime I didn't remember, as if it had been there forever. That's when I understood. The mirror hadn't moved. The room had, all at once, in some precise way, that lost me but not itself. There was a shape in the glass, not a figure exactly, a gradient darker than the rest of the dark, like smoke held in a bottle. As I watched, it gathered angles, a shoulder, a suggestion of a head with too many planes. The smell came again, iron and ash, like a fire that burned nails instead of wood. Say my name, the doubled voice murmured, too soft to disturb the air, and yet it moved the hairs on my arms. We can begin when you say it. I don't know it, I said. You do. You always do. I pushed off the bed, and the floor leaned a little to accommodate me, as if every board had been planed to the idea of my weight. I'm not interested. The shape in the glass smiled without a mouth. The smile was a shift, a refraction. It suggested teeth the way glint suggests a blade. Interest is not a requirement, it said gently. Attention is, and you are attending. I reached for the lamp and stopped. My hand hovered over the switch, sweat cooling where my fingers brushed metal. Every light in the room had become a decision with consequences I did not yet understand. I thought of my grandmother's apartment when I was small, the crocheted covers supposedly to keep dust off the mirrors, but really there through all of January, all of February, until Lent had passed and the eggs were boiled blue. She had wrapped every reflective surface in fabric before a funeral, to keep the spirit from catching in the glass, she'd said, not smiling, because superstition doesn't like to be laughed at, even kindly. You're not a spirit, I said. Names, the voice crooned, pleased. You are almost there. You're not mine. The glass darkened by a shade. Closer. My throat felt small. You're not a memory. Closer. You're not a god. Farther, the voice said, almost disappointed. Don't flatter me, the room breathed. The mirror fogged just in the center, a flower of condensation unfolding. I stepped nearer. The fog bled into letters, slow, deliberate. Do you want to be kept? I wiped the words away with the heel of my hand. The moisture pattern was wrong. It didn't smear so much as separate around the letters, falling back into them as soon as my skin passed. Behind the glass, the shadow watched my palm with a child's interest. As if I were a moth, it had no concept of crushing. What does kept mean? I asked. What it always means, the voice said. You are gathered, you are held, you are not lost to yourself. That's possession, I said. Language makes cowards of us. The doubled voice softened into something almost intimate. You live in one room and wish it were larger. You live in one skin and wish you could shed it just long enough to sleep. You manage your fear like a pet you resent for barking. Being kept means your edges are watched when you are too tired to watch them. My hand shook. And what do you take? The mirror exhaled, and for a moment I felt the wind of it without breeze. Very little at first, it said. The parts you set down anyway. Stray promises, unmade phone calls, the thin metal of regret. We feed on what you no longer want to carry. It was absurd, bargaining through a pane of glass with something that understood me as a collection of corners. And yet most of my life had been a series of absurd bargains. With sleep, with deadlines, with a body that refused to stop counting hours, even when I asked politely. I won't say your name, I said. You already have, it answered. I opened my mouth to argue, but in the mirror my reflection was half a beat behind me. My own mouth lagged in the glass, then caught up, then smiled when I did not. I turned the lamp on. Light split the room into geometry. There was my bed with the book still face down, where I'd left it days ago. There was the sideboard with its shallow bowl of coins and keys. There was the mirror opposite me, tall as a person and older than my lease was allowed to admit. The shape in it was gone, the surface only surface again. My reflection stared back, hair scrambled, eyes ringed, mouth firmed into a line I recognized from every morning I had been tired and still gone to work. I slept with the lamp on, and the mirror watching me watch it. In the morning, nothing had been moved. The mirror returned to its place above the sideboard without my having touched it. My toothbrush was where it belonged. The faucet dripped and would continue to drip until I called a plumber and lied about the damage deposit. For a few hours, the world accepted my version of it. The mirror accepted the bathrooms and returned only steam. At lunch, I told Danny. We met on the bench outside the office, a windless gap of concrete and chain link where people smoked on the margins and pretended not to. She lit a cigarette just to hold it. She didn't smoke anymore. She liked the ritual. You look like somebody played a drum inside your skull, she said, but quiet, respectfully. Thanks, I said dryly, and told her about the mirror. Not the voice, not the way the room had tilted, not the handprints that bloomed and unbloomed on the glass. I told her only about the fog, the phrase it wrote, the smell. She listened, as she always did, without interrupting, without the polite noises some people make that empty your sentences of their weight. When I finished, she nodded once. In some places, they paint a thin line of red across the top of a mirror because it's a door and they want the door to look like a wound, she said. The dead won't walk through a wound. They've had enough of that. In other places, they cut the mirror into the shape of a coin to bribe whatever's on the other side not to come over. She flicked ash that didn't exist. We're not in those places. You think I need to cover it? I think you need to decide whether you want to see what you saw again, she said. Cover it if you don't, but if you do, don't pretend you don't. What would you do? She smiled. I'd draw a circle and write some names inside it. In the mirror? She shrugged. Not on the glass. Never on the glass. We were quiet. The chain link fence hummed in a way only metal does after sun sits on it for hours. A bus hissed and knelt. The city wore its tired face, the one that looks fine from the right angle and terrible if you catch it unprepared. Danny, I said, if something answered me, if it asked for me to say its name, what happens if I do? She put the unsmoked cigarette out against the bench and pocketed the butt, tidy as always. If you say anyone's name often enough, you change them. Names are levers. You just have to be very sure which door you want to open. I bought red thread on the way home, not because of the wound story, not because of my grandmother's mirrors, but because thread is what you use when you need to remind your hands to finish what they've started. I tied a length across the top of the frame, a thin horizon. I set a bowl of salt on the sideboard because the idea of salt is older than me and arrogant to ignore. I did not draw on the glass. The apartment watched me arrange these things with the patience of a host who knows the party will end in the kitchen. When I finished, the mirror fogged again, slow and deliberate. What will you give? Nothing. I said out loud, and my reflection didn't lag this time. You said you'd take what I set down. I'm not setting anything down. The letters smeared inward into a circle, small as a coin, then drew out into a straight line that slid toward the frame, like a needle deciding the seam. The smell of iron woke in the room, not oppressive, almost companionable, like old blood that has been acknowledged and therefore doesn't need to insist. You can give what you will not miss, the voice said. It was quieter with the lamp on. The first offering is always easy. A name you do not use, a promise you do not intend to keep, a picture. Let us take its shadow. Whose picture? I asked. Yours, it said almost kindly. I laughed. It came out wrong. No, you will not miss a shadow, the voice said. Only the edges will soften. People will step closer to hear you, and you will confuse that for love. At night, the bed will feel bigger. You will mistake that for freedom. I thought of the mornings I had woken and pressed my face into the cool, unoccupied halves of pillows. I thought of my own name, said out loud to an empty room, because voices sound different when they are answered, and sometimes you want to hear the difference, even if you're the one echoing back. No, I said again. Brave, the voice said, not mocking. I couldn't tell if it approved. That night, the mirror did not speak further. It breathed. The fog appeared in patterns that meant nothing, shapes like cities, shapes like maps of rivers that had never found their mouths. I dreamed with the lamp on and woke twice to the sense of someone in the doorway who was me but older and turned slightly away so I could see only the shoulder and the set of the spine and not the face. The third morning, my phone's front camera opened by itself and snapped a photo in my pocket. I saw the notification on the lock screen and laughed at the clumsiness of my own technology until I opened the photo and found that the black of my pocket had recorded not black, but a smear of gray, like breath on a pane, and in the breath, doors are for people who want to be asked. I turned the phone off and left it on the kitchen counter and went to work early. Throughout the day, every reflective surface I passed had something off about it, as if mirrors around the city were gossiping. The elevator did not show my shoes. The window in the meeting room put the skyline behind me where the parking lot should have been. The chrome of the restroom hand dryer swallowed my hand and returned a different one, mine, but from a morning I had not yet had, with a small crescent-shaped scar at the base of the thumb I did not possess. I dried my hands on my pants and did not wash them again until I was home. Danny texted at dusk. You okay? Yes, I typed, then backspaced. I don't know. The mirror wants names. It wants a picture. It wants me to be softer. She wrote, they all do. I wrote, how many have you met? She wrote, enough. I wanted to ask what she had given. I did not. because friendship resents inventory. Instead, I asked if she would come over. She sent back, bring chalk. When she arrived, she carried a small mason jar with something that looked like sand, but wasn't. She took her shoes off at the door and stood for a moment, breathing through her mouth. Smell it? I asked. Like pennies and dirt, she said, and wet keys. I handed her the chalk. I thought you said not on the glass. Not on the glass, she agreed. She crouched and drew a circle on the floor in front of the sideboard, crisp as if the tile had been cut for it. Sit inside, she said. Put your palms down. Don't cross your ankles. Is this for me or for it? For you, she said. Demons don't care about circles unless they are hungry enough to pretend to. People need edges. We forget where they are. Are they demons? I asked, and my voice did a small thing I did not enjoy. She sat down too, outside the circle, cross-legged, palms on her knees. The ones in mirrors, she said, they're angles we made by accident. Blessings mispronounced, doors hung fractionally wrong. We call them demons when they do what all angles do. Cut. She tipped a small measure of the jar's contents into her palm and blew it lightly across the chalk. The line thickened, and some are old, older than glass. Those are different. They are the hunger that made mirrors inevitable. My apartment, which rarely looked big, looked huge with the two of us on the floor and the mirrors deciding what to admit. I won't say its name, I said. That's safe for as long as it doesn't say yours, Danny said, and lifted her gaze to the glass. It fogged at once, quick as a gasp. Hello, it wrote in tiny letters. Hello, hello, hello. Down the right side, like a margin note. Imp, Danny said softly. Little thing, it's not one of the great ones. Reassuring, I said, and meant it. Small bargains are harder to resist because they don't feel like bargains, she said. It will ask you for what already leaks. If you refuse, it will suggest a trade you can live with. If you accept, it will widen the leak and call it relief. What do I do? Keep refusing until you hear yourself lying, she said. Then stop talking. The mirror fogged again. Don't be unkind. Danny smiled without showing teeth. We're being very kind, she said. We're telling you no. Say my name, the mirror wrote. Not tonight, Danny said. Say my name, say my name, say my name. The letters began to overlap. The fog pattern became frantic, then neat again, all caps like a teacher correcting a child's sloppiness. The smell thickened until the tongue tasted like iron coin. I looked at the chalk circle and the line of red thread I'd tied across the frame. They felt like laughing protections, small, domestic. They were the sort of things people do with their hands to convince their lungs to behave. I'm tired, I said. I don't want to talk to you. The mirror cleared. My reflection looked like it belonged to someone who had fallen asleep a year ago and not yet woken. Behind me, behind the version of me in the glass, the room's angle was wrong. The doorway was narrower. The lamp was taller. The sideboard's bowl of coins was on the wrong side. The shape stepped into that wrong room, out of view, as casual as a shadow, deciding to change owners. Danny inhaled sharply. We should go. I stood without thinking, and my foot smudged the chalk line, and my heel lifted, and for a second I was taller, in the mirror, leaner, easier to forget. Don't step out, Danny said, voice calm, like she had made it that way by force. Sit now. I sat. The chalk dust whitened my palms. The mirror cleared and held. My reflection looked like mine again, tired and present, all the edges of me accounted for. The lamp flickered and died. We sat in the dim and waited. The mirror watched us watch it. The smell thinned. Somewhere above us, a neighbor sneezed, and then sneezed again, and then said bless you to themselves, or to a person I had never seen in the hallway. The city's ordinary noises threaded themselves back into the room through the seams in the windows. After a long time, Danny said, don't break it. I wasn't going to. You were considering it. I was. Would it help? It would make smaller mirrors, she said. More edges to practice on. It would make it easier for you to pretend you weren't listening. I could cover it. She nodded. You could, and it would wait, and it would count, and it would keep time for you until you wanted to be on its schedule. The mirror fogged one last time. We can help you sleep, it wrote. We can count. Danny sighed. They always say that. Because it works, because it's true, she said. But the mornings cost more than anyone thinks they will. She stood and brushed chalk from her jeans. I'm leaving the circle, she said. Don't sweep it until morning. If you need to pee, step over. Don't step through. Don't drag your heel. And don't say yes to anything. Anything, she said. At the door, she paused. If it asks to see you when you were small, say no. If it asks to show you your mother's hands, say no. If it asks to borrow your face for an hour, say no and turn the light on. If the light won't turn on, sing something you hate. What if it asks my name? I asked. She did not smile. If it says your name, say it back and keep it. If it expects you to repeat its name in exchange, sneeze. She touched the frame with 2 fingers, very light. It's little, she said, but it has big friends. Don't be interesting. Too late, I said, and she left. Alone, the apartment regained its default size. I sat inside the chalk and watched my breath make a little weather. The mirror did not fog again. The smell left as slowly as it had arrived. Midnight found me still awake, still counting the objects I could name. Lamp, bowl, coin, key, book, because the human mind likes inventories when the dark is full of unnumbered things. At 1, I stood and stepped over the chalk to pee, and did not look at myself in the bathroom mirror, which felt like a victory worthy of small applause. At 2, I lay down on the bed and left the lamp off, and listened to the building hum its old heat through old pipes. At 3, the mirror spoke. It did not fog. It did not write. My name came from the glass the way a breath fogs then clears. It was my name in my grandmother's mouth, stern and warm, and it was my name in Danny's, dry and kind, and it was my name in my own voice the time I had said it out loud to see if it sounded like a person I could forgive. Don't, I said, but the word had no address, and so it didn't arrive anywhere it needed to. The mirror was only the mirror. My reflection lay pale and small in the bed. The chalk circle, a bright ring on the floor, like the chalk outlines in old shows that were always the wrong shape for a body. I rolled onto my side. The reflection did too, but a fraction of a second late, and smiled in a way I did not feel. Say my name, the doubled voice murmured from the dark that was not quite the dark of the glass. I shut my eyes, and the sound was closer. The bed dipped as if a person had sat gently on the corner. I opened my eyes and saw no one there, and in the mirror I saw a silhouette seated, patient, hands folded in its lap. The smell returned, thinner, agreeable, pennies and water, a key kept in the mouth for safekeeping. Say it, the voice said. We can count. I gripped the sheet and counted forward instead. 1 to 10, 10 to 20, and when I reached the end of the small numbers, I started again, because that's what roads are, repetition disguised as progress. The voice waited. The reflection watched. The bed was a boat that would not tip over because the sea had been told enough times that it must not. At 4, the mirror fogged with a shape I recognized without wanting to. Not letters, a palm, the size of my hand, pressed from the other side, the hand that belonged to all my bad mornings and some of my good ones, the hand that had carried bags, written letters, held other hands, and covered my eyes when movies became too sharp. My hand, the fog hand slid slowly down the glass and left no streak. Say it, the voice whispered, and the whisper was a kind thing, a blanket offered in a cold room. I turned my face into the pillow and said the first name I had ever called anything by that was not its name. A nickname from childhood, the one my grandmother had used when I was too stubborn to bring my shoes from the porch. Not my name, exactly. Not the mirror's, either. A wrong name, on purpose, because sometimes error is offense. The mirror stilled. We were quiet together. Then, the room, the glass, the little demon that wasn't a god and refused to be a memory. I breathed. The building breathed. Somewhere far off a siren passed and did not pause. I counted forward under my breath, and when the handprint faded, when the smell thinned to nothing, when sleep finally found me, I went under like a coin, deciding, for one night, not to show either face. Morning didn't feel like morning. It felt like the second half of a sentence, as if night had said something it intended to finish later. My apartment held still the way forests sometimes do on windless days, waiting, not resting. The chalk circle had scuffed where my heel dragged, a thin wound through white. The bowl of salt looked smaller. The red thread lay straight as a horizon, innocent of everything it refused. I made coffee and avoided the mirror. Avoidance is a form of attention. The glass knew it. The smell didn't come. No pennies, no wet keys. Only the clean heat of the mug in my hands and the human scent of just woken skin. I told myself to go to work and behave like a person who sleeps. The elevator's chrome showed me from the shoulders down and swapped my shoes for a pair I have never owned. In the lobby's dark pane, I watched a version of myself pause a beat too long, as if waiting for stage direction. When I stepped outside, the city's wide mirror, every window of every building, every car door catching sunlight, turned its many faces toward me and pretended to be casual. At my desk, the glass of my monitor ticked like a wristwatch. When I went to the restroom and washed my hands, the hand dryer returned me a stranger's fingers. For a second, longer nails, a crescent scar at the base of the thumb I did not carry, then remembered itself and gave mine back with indifferent heat. In the hallway, a coworker lifted a phone to show me a meme, the black rectangle filled with a view of my face, not looking, my mouth half open, my eyes dilated to the edges as if the room were darker than it was. I texted Danny, "It's worse in daylight." She wrote back, "That makes sense. Daylight is 1,000 tiny mirrors. Come by at lunch. Bring the jar." I went. Her apartment smelled like basil and dust and old books. She had a narrow wooden table by the window with a row of small mirrors face down on it. They were all shapes, a compact that might once have belonged to a dancer. A rectangle with a chip at one corner, an oval the size of a palm. The glass foxed around the edges like a photograph left in sun. "What are those for?" I asked. "Practice," she said, "teaching my eyes what it looks like when glass is only glass. Do you ever win?" She smiled. "Nobody wins. We get less surprised." I set the jar on the table. Up close, the not sand in it was paler than I remembered, almost pearly. "What is it?" "Ground eggshell and salt," she said. "My grandmother called it cascarilla, and then the aunt who raised me called it chalk, because people listen better to words they already know. Dust to mark edges. Dust to remind floors they are floors." "I slept in the circle," I said. "It didn't cross. It did other things. It will," she said simply. "It's learning you." She pulled a small box from under the table, the kind that used to hold stationery when people wrote letters with their names at the top. Speaking of ancestors, inside, neatly folded, were crocheted covers, precisely the kind I remembered from my grandmother's apartment. Cream and off-white, and one strange green, all loops and small flowers and scallops. At the bottom lay a tiny shaving mirror with a crack like a sliver of ice across it. Under that, a note in shaky script. I read, "If they start writing, write back, but not on glass. Do not accept counting you did not ask for. Do not give your face away. If you must look, look through your left eye first." She wrote that to me when I moved here, Danny said. and I didn't listen, and then I did. Where did she learn this? I asked. Before glass. Some people don't need mirrors. They still know how to open. I carried one of the covers to my apartment like a fragile animal. On the way, every shop window tried to show me myself, with new inventory added, an accessory I had not purchased, a slow smile where mine was not, the tilt of a chin I couldn't find if I tried, the suggestion of someone taller standing just behind me and calling it posture. In the crosswalk, a puddle reflected only the sky. I was grateful for that blank. The mirror breathed when I came in, not a fog. Exactly. The sense of pressure, like a hand on the other side, debating whether to knock. I stood in front of it with the cover folded in my hands, the way people hold towels when they're not ready to swim. I brought you a blanket, I said, absurd to be polite. It fogged at once. Little housekeeping is welcome, the letters wrote, neat, amused. I didn't smile. I pinned the cover over the frame with 2 push pins, and the room changed the way rooms do when a piece of furniture finally takes the place it always intended. The air went ordinary. The red thread looked like an accent, not a question. For the first time since the handprint on the bathroom mirror, I didn't feel watched. I expected relief to be clean. Instead, it was heavy. I sat down on the floor and felt everything I had been refusing to feel surge back into my bones. I cried, the blunt, ungainly kind of crying that swells the nose and leaves the eyelids raw. It lasted a minute or an hour. When it ended, the apartment was exactly as it had been. The mirror breathed under the cover like a cat behind a curtain, pretending it isn't there. In the evening, I cooked pasta and ate it standing up like it wasn't a meal. At 9, my phone turned on in the kitchen all by itself and took a photo of the ceiling, a blur, a gray, a suggestion of breath. I shut it in a drawer. At 10, I pulled the crocheted cover aside by a thumb's width and peered with my left eye first. The glass was just glass. My face looked like a person's face, tired, improved by salt. At 1 in the morning, the smell arrived again, thinner, patient, pennies pressed into river mud. The cover fluttered like something exhaled behind it. I lay on the bed and did not turn my head and counted forward very softly, not to fall asleep, but to make a path between the numbers and lie down on it like a board between roofs. The voice said my name from behind the crocheted loops, not in the doubled tone this time. One voice, low, certain, placed where it felt like a person might kneel beside a bed to offer a glass of water to a child who has woken from a bad dream. Say mine, it added. I will accept almost any version. No, I said, and my lips touched the pillow so the word stayed mine. I slept between insistences. The apartment kept the count I refused. The next day, the glass in the office doors returned only the silhouette of anyone who wasn't me. The elevator remembered my shoes. The hand dryer forgot my future scar. I thought I had won a small thing, one of those unremarkable victories you only notice later because you didn't stumble. At lunch, 2 coworkers asked me to join them for photos in the alley because the light was good. I started to say yes. Daylight is 1,000 tiny mirrors. I said I had a call and went to hold the phone against my ear and listen to no one for 15 minutes, while my own face reflected in the black was just black. When the workday ended, I took the long way home to avoid a store window I knew would try to show me something I couldn't unsee. I passed a thrift shop instead. In the display, a field of frames, gold ones peeling, wooden ones, earnest and square. The glass in them rippled, not with breath, but with the old waviness of poured panes. One oval held no glass at all, only empty space where a face would be, a suggestion as strong as any reflection. I went in and asked the woman behind the counter if I could buy the oval, even though it reflected nothing. People take the empty ones more often than the others, she said cheerfully. Less trouble. I carried the oval home like a talisman and leaned it against the sideboard below the covered mirror. The absence in the frame felt like an ally, a mouth that had decided not to speak. At dusk, a message slid under my door, a Polaroid, newly taken. The chemicals had not entirely dried. In it, my living room, the bowl of coins, the book on the arm of the chair, the crocheted cover over the mirror, and in the lower corner, a smudge the size and shape of a fingertip, pressed from inside the photograph. On the back, in neat, patient handwriting, I recognized from no one living. We can keep your pictures safe while you sleep. I locked the deadbolt 3 times and texted Danny a photo of the Polaroid. She wrote, "It wants your edges." I wrote, "Do you think I already gave some away?" She, "Do you think you did?" I put the Polaroid face down under the salt bowl. That night, I dreamed I was 8 and stubborn, refusing to bring my shoes from the porch until my grandmother laughed and called me by the wrong name on purpose. In the dream, the wrong name fit like a sweater turned inside out. Warm, unlovely, correct enough to get me through a door. I woke with the sense of having answered someone at the threshold and not remembered what I said. At 3, the mirror tapped the wall under its cover, very softly, 3 times. I counted to 30 and did not look. It tapped again, 2 times. 30 again. The smell arrived as thin as a pencil line. "Say it," the voice murmured, and I could hear now that it was the voice I hear in my own head when I am trying to get myself to do a thing I don't want to do. Gentle, persuasive, not above flattery. "You will sleep. You will wake without the stale taste of night." "My mornings are mine," I said, and sleep came anyway, like a person who has let the argument end and will not keep punishing anyone for having discussed it. The next afternoon, Danny came over with 2 things wrapped in cloth. She unrolled the first, a small mirror with silvering gone in patches. "This is for it," she said. "A toy, something to chew." "And the other?" I asked. She unrolled the second and placed it in my palm. A key. Brass, ordinary, old enough to have been pressed by a machine that didn't care for the uniformity of the teeth. "This is for you," she said. "It doesn't fit anything. That's the point. Carry it. When you feel pulled, grip it. It reminds the hand it belongs to objects that open and close." "You make edges," I said. "They exist whether we make them or not," she said. "But yes, sometimes we have to draw around what is already there so we don't pretend we can't see it." We set the toy mirror on the floor facing the sideboard, glass to glass but not touching. We drew a new circle, thicker with the eggshell powder, and put my chair inside it. Danny sat outside again, close, hands on her knees, listening with her whole body. The crocheted cover lifted itself by a finger's width and fell, lifted and fell. It was almost funny, the smallest of hauntings, acting like a cat investigating a doorstop. "We're gonna make it say your name wrong," Danny said softly, eyes on the cover, "and you will ignore it, the way you ignore a stranger calling for someone else in a store." "How?" I asked. "By not being interesting," she said, and smiled because she knew I couldn't help it. "Also by asking it a question it cannot answer. Where is it when the lights are off?" she said. "Or what is on the back of it?" "They're angles. They have no back." That sounded like theology, and also like furniture assembly instructions. I gripped the key. The brass warmed against my skin. "Ready?" Danny asked. "No," I said, and sat up straighter. She lifted the cover in one swift motion, and the mirror showed me my living room in daytime, concrete, unmagical. Then it showed the same room half a breath behind, as if it had forgotten which version I belonged to. Then it forgot to show the eggshell circle. The reflection presented bare floor where the white line should have been. "That's rude," Danny said. "Return it." The glass fogged. The letters came clean and patient, like handwriting of someone who believes in forms. "Will you open the door if we ask kindly?" "Where are you when the lights are off?" I asked at once. because if I thought too long, I would choose a different question and regret it. The fog erased itself. For a moment, the glass looked honestly confused. Then everywhere it wrote. Wrong, Danny said. Try again. Behind it wrote. Wrong, she said gently. Again, in the edges, Danny tipped her head. Better, she murmured, but not an answer. I said, what is on your back? Nothing for a full count of 10. Then the glass darkened in a way that was not fog and not night. The smell went copper strong. The red thread lifted as if a draft had remembered something important. The letters came larger, less neat. Do not. Because you have no back, I said softly. You are the cut, not the knife. The mirror shook, not much, enough that the pushpins chimed against the frame. I thought of the many names people give to small earthquakes to keep themselves calm. Truck passing, heavy train, old pipes, my upstairs neighbor. Say my name, the voice urged now, impatient. It had let the polite tone slip. Something bored sat under it, something hungry for novelty. Say it wrong, say it right, say anything. I won't, I said. You can say mine if you like. It did. It said my name as if it were a word for water. It said my name in my grandmother's voice, and then in the voice of a teacher who had written my report card in blue ink with a fountain pen and believed compliments should be precise, not generous. It said my name the way the small child I had been said it to herself when she was alone in rooms too big for her. My throat tightened because all those places existed and I had left them unattended. Don't, Danny said, and her voice arrived where it needed to in my ear. I gripped the key until the ridges pressed their logic into my palm. You can say it, I told the mirror. It isn't yours. The glass brightened as if a light had come on behind it. The smell turned sweet for a second, then metallic again, and in the reflection, something stepped into the doorway of my bedroom. A person the height of me, with my shoulders and my way of tilting my head when I am trying to decide whether to lie. It smiled with my mouth. It put its hands into the pockets of its jeans, the way I do when my hands want to be busy and I insist on stillness. It was not me. It was a rehearsal that had learned its lines. Would you like to see your mother's hands? It asked softly. You have her fingers, but not the knuckles. We can show you the future of your hands. No, I said and counted forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not to 10, just through it. Would you like to borrow our face? It asked cheerfully now. We can let you wear it for an hour. You would not be recognized. You could go where you like, and no one would expect you. I sneezed, the most honest act my body knows, loud and absurd and human. Danny laughed once, a sharp coin of sound. The mirror hissed. The reflection blur shifted, irritated. Would you like us to show you when you will die? It asked, exasperated, as if I were a client refusing obvious discounts. No, I said. I would like you to leave. Then say it said wearily, like a parent giving a child the phrase they need to end a conversation. May I be excused? Say my knock. A knock at the door, soft and ordinary, interrupted it. The mirror didn't fog. It turned glossy and blank, as if it were embarrassed by mundane interruptions. Danny and I looked at each other. I nodded toward the door. She stood and went to the peephole, then stiffened. Who? I whispered. You, she said. The mirror remained blank. The knock sounded again, 3 polite taps anyone could ignore. I picked up the key and walked to the door, and did not look through the peephole. Who is it? I asked. Me, my voice said from the hall. Forgot my key. My stomach dropped a small measured distance. I looked at Danny. She shook her head once. In the mirror, the reflection did not move. It stayed at the bedroom doorway, hands in pockets, waiting to be asked in. Sing, Danny mouthed. What? The song you hate, she mouthed, urgent. The one you sang at 3 when the lights wouldn't come on. I had not told her there were songs in the dark. I had not told anyone which one. I sang 2 lines of it, flat, resentful. The voice in the hallway sang the next line, perfectly on pitch, with a gentleness I have never given that song. Not me, Danny said, don't open. The mirror fogged and wrote very small at the bottom edge, where words are scribbled in notebooks when a teacher is watching. Open, please. No, I said, and the word hit both sides of the door at once. The thing in the hall began to cry. Not loud, not a performance. The way people cry when they have dropped the groceries and the eggs have smashed and there is no money for more. My hand found the deadbolt by instinct. My fingers tightened around it. Danny touched my wrist, a light pressure, a reminder that wrists can learn. In the reflection, the person who wasn't me pulled its hands from its pockets and showed its empty palms. It took a step into the room and stopped short at the chalk line, which it had pretended not to see. The glass did not show the circle. The thing inside it felt the edge anyway and smiled without moving its mouth. Say it said gently, or don't, but do not make me bored. Where are you when the lights are off? I asked again, not because I expected the answer to change, but because repetition is a hammer. Behind it wrote quickly, as if saying it fast would make it true. Wrong, I said. The crocheted cover lifted with a small reluctance, a child told to go to bed while the adults are still talking. A breeze I could not feel moved the loops. From the hall, the voice I could not claim said my name once, followed by please, and then nothing. Danny stepped close to the mirror and raised the toy mirror on the floor so that glass faced glass, two planes considering each other. Look, she said softly to the demon, or the angle, or the cut. Can you see your back in this? The mirror shuddered like a horse at a sudden shadow. For an instant the smell was ozone, not iron, as if lightning had been a thought and decided against itself. The reflection dipped, a head's motion that could mean agreement or calculation. It lifted its hand, my hand, and pressed the palm against the inside of the glass. I lifted mine, not to meet it, but to show the space between. My fingers trembled. The key's teeth bit my skin. In the mirror, my palm left no prints. In the room, my palm sweated like a person's. Where are you when there are no mirrors? I asked. It did not write. The face that was not my face smiled the way puddles smile when wind skates them into coins. There are always mirrors, it said. You carry them in your eyes. Danny swore softly, as if that were the answer she had hoped she would not hear. It has friends, she said. Not big ones, but enough. I can cover my eyes, I said, and even as I joked, the room took the idea too seriously. The light dimmed, the edges of furniture blurred, the mirror brightened, as if to compensate. Don't try to be clever, Danny said. Clever is a synonym for lonely. She reached into her bag and took out a flat screwdriver. We need to see the back. I grabbed her wrist. You said never on the glass. Not on, she said. Behind. She slid the blade carefully under the frame's backing and pried. The mirror hummed. Not a sound, a vibration, like a gnat at the edge of hearing. The cardboard peeled away an inch, two. The smell surged. Behind the glass, under the black paper, the silver was a night sky rejected by the moon. Scratched in it, faint as old ink, a series of thin, repeating loops, like someone had been practicing one letter over and over. Not my name, not Danny's. A curve that wanted to be a word, the way a bud wants a flower. Stop, the reflection said, and for the first time it sounded like it cared about something other than me being interesting. What is on your back? I asked again, soft, as if I were asking a child where it hurts. Stop, it said sharply, and the lights in the apartment popped off in a politeness of failure, one by one. In the rich dark after, I could hear the city the way you hear your own blood when you lie wrong, compressed, insistent, mostly harmless. We both had our phones. We did not turn on the flashlights. We stood with our hands full of keys and tools and small powders and counted our breaths the way Danny had taught me, in on one, out on two, small numbers making a road. In the mirror there was light the room did not own. The figure waited with my face carefully neutral, the way I make it when cameras point. Say it, it asked again, quiet, tired, almost shy. Please. I thought of the first bargain it had offered. Give us a picture, we will soften the edges. I thought of the later ones, your mother's hands, our face, your future. I thought of the little ones I had accepted all my life from things that did not speak. Let me be too tired to care for a week. Let me keep the light on all night. Let me be bravely quiet and call it peace. I thought of my grandmother's crocheted covers and the way her hands had moved without looking when she reached for the edge of a mirror and pinned it like a blouse. I know your name, I said, and it was not bravado. The loops on the silver had told me, and the handprints on glass, and the way daylight had made 1,000 invitations, and the smell of iron suggesting not blood, but ink. I did not speak it. The shape in the mirror tipped its head, interested, cautious, hunger rewiring itself to curiosity. I held the unsaid in my mouth. It tasted like a coin and like a promise. Don't, Danny murmured. Don't be interesting. I won't say it, I told the mirror, but I will write mine. The figure blinked. Once, slowly. The room remembered it had a lamp and turned it on by itself, at the lowest setting, as if choosing a tone for us all. I stepped to the table and took a piece of paper from a notebook and wrote my name the way my grandmother had written it on letters, with the first letter too large and the last letter looping back to underline the whole. I set the paper on the sideboard under the bowl of salt and the Polaroid and the toy mirror, a stack of small frictionless objects, remembering their edges. The reflection watched my hand, greedy the way a cat watches thread. You may not have it, I said, and then, before interesting could tempt me again, I draped the crocheted cover back over the mirror and pinned it with steady fingers. 1, 2, top corners, then the sides, as if dressing someone else for weather. In the wool soft dim under the cover, the glass breathed and breathed again, and then held its breath like a child in a game. From the hall came the sound of the elevator, a door opening, someone's keys, the minute intrusions of other people's lives. My phone vibrated with nothing at all. Ghost alerts, reminders that I had once agreed to be reminded. Tomorrow, Danny said, we open the back and see what it's written there. We make a decision. What kind? The only kind that lasts, she said, the one you have to live with. I lay awake while morning stacked its gray plates behind the blinds. Somewhere between 4 and 5, when the body is most easily convinced it is alone, I imagined, not without comfort, the mirror without the glass, a frame, an empty, an oval I had bought in a thrift store because it reflected nothing and therefore told the truth. I slept for an hour, and in that hour I dreamed not of hands or names, but of a room where all the mirrors had backs, and on those backs were words that refused to be pronounced, and that was enough. When I woke, the crocheted cover was cool under my fingers, heavy, honest. The mirror hadn't spoken. The apartment breathed like a house again, not a throat. I texted Danny. She answered, "Today we pry." I held the key. I thought about boring. I thought about not looking. I thought about the urge to make a clean cut, which angles always know how to use against you. I made coffee. I ate toast with too much butter, because butter never pretended to be anything but what it is. At the appointed hour, Danny knocked. It was her knock, 3 and 1, the rhythm she had used for years. I opened the door without asking, and she was herself on my threshold, eyes alive, hair damp, the smell of rain around her even though it had not rained. We unhooked the mirror from the wall and laid it face down on the rug. The backing paper tore away in strips. The raw silver on the back caught the window light and held it like a shallow lake holds a cloud. There, near the bottom, the repeated loops became a word, Not mine, not anyone's I would ever say. A name like a hinge, simple and old, made of a letter that wanted to close, and another that wanted to open, and a third that pretended to be a nail and was really a stitch. Don't, Danny said again, but softly, because we both knew the temptation wasn't sound, it was shape. I'm not, I said, and meant it. We stared until our eyes watered, and the letters made other letters, and then I blinked, and they became themselves again. Danny drew a figure eight on its side over the name, with the eggshell powder, slow and deliberate, like teaching a child to trace a road. The powder clung to the silver as if that were its business. We both exhaled. Now what? I asked. Now it will decide if it wants to be a mirror or a door, she said, and we will decide if we want to live with either. And if we don't, she smiled, then we will make it a wall. We flipped it carefully, cover still draped, and hung it back on its nail. The room did not object. Somewhere inside the crochet, a breath came and went and did not ask to be counted. The rest of the day passed the way good days do. Laundry, grocery lists, a text from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be a wrong number that apologized in a way that felt like a blessing, a nap that didn't try to be more than 15 minutes and therefore succeeded. As dusk pressed its forearms to my windowsill, I felt the room notice, behind the cover, something thought about its choices. When the first fog of evening touched the glass felt, not seen, the smell of iron failed to arrive. Instead, a dry mineral scent like old coins left in a cotton pocket. The voice did not ask for its name. It did not offer mine. It spoke a different sentence entirely, in a tone that belonged to weather. We can begin. No, I said, and turned the lamp on. Tomorrow, I told myself, we pry further, or we stop. We live with a wall. We learn how to sleep with a covered mouth in the room. We count forward and backward and sideways until numbers lose meaning and mean only walking. We keep the key. We keep the cover. We keep the circle and chalk. We keep our edges. We keep the unsaid. We keep not kept. The mirror breathed once as if it had remembered me counting and didn't know what to do with a person who counted only the steps she chose. And night, patient as ink, rolled to the edges of the glass and waited for me to make up my mind. The storm arrived without rain, a dry pressure that made the window panes flex and the walls click like old teeth. Around 10, the streetlights pulsed once and went out. The apartment took a breath and forgot to exhale. In the first stretch of quiet, after the power died, I could hear the building imagining its own edges, pipes settling, wood remembering wet seasons, my upstairs neighbor saying "oh" to the dark as if it had asked a question. Under the crocheted cover, the mirror stirred, not a fog movement. The loops lifted and settled as if someone had brushed them with a careful hand from the other side. I sat on the floor in the circle we hadn't swept, the white lines scuffed but present, and held the key in my palm. Brass warms to skin quickly. I reminded my hand what it meant. From the hallway came footsteps, polite and unhurried. They passed my door and returned, as if trying on the idea of belonging here. Someone's flashlight clicked on and off once. Testing. The corridor swallowed it. My phone vibrated. No signal. A message anyway, delivered by whatever routes messages take when the ordinary ones fail. A single word on a blank screen, in neat patient type that matched no app, no person. Begin? Not with you, I said to the room, and the cover moved in a tiny pleased ripple to hear the conversation continue. Do you want me there? Danny's voice said through the door, a whisper that knew its own limits. Only if you brought boring, I said, and unbolted 3 locks. She'd brought a tote bag, heavy with ordinary, duct tape, a staple gun, cotton canvas cut from a painter's drop cloth, a packet of flour, a lemon, a roll of brown craft paper, an old newspaper tied with twine. She had a headlamp and refused to turn it on, cupping a tea light in one hand like a tiny moon instead. Storm? She asked. Pretending, I said. We sat cross-legged, me inside the circle, her out. The tea light made a small, reliable crown. Shadows existed, but they weren't doing tricks. Somewhere in the building, a door opened and closed with the kind of confidence that comes from long tenancy. We agreed yesterday, she said. Door, mirror, or wall? Wall, I said, before the mirror could offer a fourth option with a better adjective. The cover lifted in a small sulk and fell. What if it asks to help? I asked. It will, she said. Say thank you, and do not invite its hands. She spread the craft paper on the rug and smoothed it flat with her palm, slow strokes that made a sound like calming. Back first, she said. We seal the back so that what's there knows it's been seen. It's rude otherwise. Rudeness is an unguarded door. We took the mirror down together and laid it face down, cover still draped, so the glass couldn't catch L-shaped slivers of tea light and make something clever of them. The backing paper we had loosened yesterday lifted easily. The raw silver held a little city of scratches, the repeated loops of that stubborn hinge name blinking faintly. In the dim, every time I almost read it, the tea light guttered, and the letters learned a new way to be themselves. Cascarilla, Danny said, and shook a veil of eggshell dust across the loops. Once, twice, figure 8, the sideways infinity, that means not a number, a path. The powder clung where it should. The name lost its sharpness, then its shape, then its insistence. Flour paste, she said, mixing water and flour with her thumb in a chipped bowl, until it made a glue the color of polite. She spread it over the silver with a metal spatula, blunt as a putty knife. Canvas, she said, and I pressed the cotton down into the paste with my palms, the weave of it printing itself into my skin like a reminder. Newspaper, she said. She untied the twine and handed me the top section dated a dozen years ago, headlines already mostly wrong. I read the first line of a story about a weather system that had never arrived and breathed easier. She layered the paper over the canvas, smoothing it as if I were a child, and the news needed to be less complicated. The stapler thumped its decisions along the wooden frame. 1, 2, 3, 9 in all. An odd number because odd numbers feel like living things. Lemon, she said. She cut it in half with a small knife and squeezed a line of juice along the seam where glass and frame met, the way you run citrus along the rim of a glass to teach it a better mouth. Salt, she said, and pinched a thread of it along the lemon's wet path. You don't have to believe, she added, not unkindly. Just remember, what does the lemon do? Reminds the room we are awake, she said. Behind the cover, the mirror breathed through cotton and paper, like a person under a blanket being a good sport. In the dim beneath our hands, something in the frame settled, as if accepting an argument it didn't intend to revisit. We flipped it, a careful belly-to-back roll, and propped it against the sideboard. The cover hung heavy and sure. The smell tried to arrive, iron and keys, and found only lemon oil and paste and newsprint and canvas, all the small domestic insistences of a life in progress. It softened into a trace of something like rust, and then gave up. The tea light's brief, important flame failed without ceremony. The room became the kind of dark that doesn't exaggerate itself. Count? I asked, because a question that offers someone else the lead is a way of drawing a line on the floor without chalk. Forward, she said, and we did, gently, head tilted like we were listening for footsteps that belonged. At 20, the cover stirred. It wasn't the mirror breathing, it was wind, real this time, finding a seam in the window and writing a letter against cloth. The building exhaled, finally remembering to. From the hall came laughter, not at us or for us, but because someone had said something worth it in a kitchen we'd never see. I think we made a wall, I said, We started one, she said. Walls are ongoing. The phone, sulking in its drawer, woke itself. Both of ours hummed at once, the way streetlights sometimes remember to behave in unison. The notification appeared, even with no service, even with all notifications off, even with the do not disturb moon on, and fat 4 words, patient type, you will miss me. True, I said, but not tonight. The message cleared itself. The drawer latched with a small self-important click. A breeze lifted the cover one more time and fell as if practicing obedience. We cleaned up, folded the craft paper, wrapped the flour bowl, capped the salt, set the canvas scraps aside as if they might be useful for smaller doors. Danny rubbed a dot of lemon into the sideboard for the simple reason of liking the smell. You can leave it like this, she said, nodding at the cover. It will knock. It will fog. It will call the way rain calls to a roof. That's what it does. If you ever want to look again, do it during a noisy hour. Play the vacuum. Boil water. Mirrors admire industry. What if I get tired of saying no? I asked. Then say it to me, she said. I'll repeat it to the glass. Sometimes you need an echo. She touched my wrist where the key's teeth had pressed small logic into skin. Keep that near, even in the shower, especially in the shower. Boring as doctrine, I said. The only kind that lasts, she said, and shouldered the tote. At the door, she looked back at the covered rectangle and smiled. Not at it, exactly, but at the way it had decided for now to be a wall. Sleep, she said. Count first. Let it count after. After she left, the apartment felt not empty, but particular, like a museum room after hours when the guards sit just outside and listen to frames creak. I turned the headlamp on for a second to find a book and turned it off again because light should be polite when dark has been asked to stay. The mirror tapped once under the cover, a small, unconvincing sound like a fingernail on cardboard. I brushed the crochet with my knuckles and said, as I might to a cat when I'm leaving a room, I'll be in the next one. In bed, I counted forward and ran out of numbers, not because I'd reached a cliff, but because the counting had done its one job, making a path to lie down on. When sleep came, it didn't swallow. It joined, the way a chair joins a table. I dreamed a practical dream. The building was the building. The hall held a bicycle someone should really move. My door had a lock, and the lock worked. The mirror was a window that had decided on being a door, and then changed its mind and become a wall, and was satisfied with that. Somewhere in the dream, my grandmother wiped a counter with a damp cloth and said nothing at all, because sometimes the best teaching is a demonstration repeated at a pace a life can keep. Morning returned like a responsible friend, knocking at the exact hour it promised. Streetlight amber became daylight gray. Then true, the power came back with a mild thunk that reset the microwave clock to 12 and made the refrigerator cough as if embarrassed by the drama. The mirror sat, covered, as if wearing a sweater chosen for warmth and not performance. The first reflective surface that misbehaved that day was the spoon. Its bowl showed me a version of my mouth saying yes. I set it down and took a fork. The fork showed nothing but fork. Some battles are logistics. On the way to work, the city tried once, gently. My reflection in a bus window turned toward someone seated behind me and smiled. It looked like me being kind to a stranger. I nodded at the window and did not go into the business of wanting to be that version all the time. By lunch, the chrome hand dryer was only metal. The elevator had normal shoes. I was not naive enough to believe that was an ending. The world that holds glass is a world of rehearsal. Storefronts pretending to be fuller than they are. Black phone screens tutoring us in selfies. Puddles auditioning as sky. But the loudest of the angles knew to knock now. I had a cover pinned with push pins like any practical garment. I had a back to my mirror with layers, silver blurred by shells, canvas, newsprint, Staples, lemon, salt. I had a word I would not say, and a name I wrote myself and kept under a bowl where it could breathe. I had a key. The second night, the storm sent a substitute. Rain, mild, congratulatory. It rinsed the city so that morning smelled briefly of knot dust. Under the cover, the mirror fluttered and found no purchase. I brushed the loops with the back of my fingers and didn't listen for an answer. On the third night, I woke at 2 to a pressure at the edge of the mattress, not a sitting, a leaning, my name, almost, in my grandmother's voice, and the hallway hummed as if the building had decided to learn a new tune. I reached for the key and held it against my tongue. Brass is honest. It tasted like the decision I had made, not dramatic, not poetic, only firm. Say mine, the mirror breathed under the blanket. A last try, not desperate. Angles don't panic, only thorough. Whisper it into the cloth. No one will hear. You will, I said, and so will I. Silence, polite as a closed door. Do you want to see your mother's hands? The voice added, trying kindness again. The offer landed without echo. I did not want to say no for the millionth time. I wanted not to be asked. But even that wanting can be a bargain, the kind that sells your edges for quiet. I know them, I said. They made this cover. In the morning, a small, impractical gift waited by the sideboard, a Polaroid face down. I turned it over and braced for a cleverness. The picture showed nothing but crochet, a field of loops, a little pilling where fingers had tugged, a pushpin catching the light and making a small star. On the back, in the neat, patient hand that had addressed me before. We can be boring, too. Prove it, I said, and propped the photo by the salt bowl like a place card. Days made their case. The mirror under cover learned the schedule of my life and tried not to interrupt. It tapped when I washed dishes, and I ignored it on principle because wet hands are for soap. It wrote on the inside of the cover in fog that left no mark, and I did not lift the edge to read. It kept time on nights I asked it not to, hum audible like the building's own, and on nights I asked for help, it counted on my count, not ahead of it, not behind. When I snapped and said out loud, stop, it stopped. When I laughed and said fine, it did not take the word as a door. It learned boring. It hated boring. It respected boring. We were making a wall, and walls work best when both sides acknowledge the other is allowed to exist. On a Saturday, I took the empty oval frame from the thrift store and hung it beside the covered mirror. Nothing reflected in it but light and walls. Sometimes I stood in front of the oval and practiced not seeing myself. It felt like brushing the back of my teeth. Unnecessary, satisfying. On a Tuesday, Danny texted, "Bring the little one." I carried the toy mirror to her apartment, wrapped in a dish towel. On her table, she had laid out 3 spoons, a cracked teacup, the tiny shaving mirror with the ice splinter crack. "We're going to teach them to be walls together," she said, and watched me lay the toy mirror down as if it might bite. "It's contagious," she added. "Edges and their keeping. It spreads." A month later, the elevator learned my shoes. It kept the lesson. The hand dryer learned my scar would belong to someone else in another choosing. It let me keep my hands. Bus windows returned commuters to themselves. Storefronts performed as storefronts and not as invitations. In the corner of my living room, beneath the cover, the mirror remembered to breathe without demanding acknowledgement. Sometimes at night, I felt it watch me when I counted, and I let it, not because I needed keeping, but because sometimes being witnessed is a form of staying. And then, one evening, a handprint bloomed on the bathroom mirror while the shower ran. It was mine and not mine. The fingers were longer. The crescent scar at the base of the thumb was where it had been in that first wrong reflection weeks ago. I wiped it away, and it returned. I wiped it again, and the steam wrote it back. I stood there with a towel around my hips and watched something try to claim me through a shape it misremembered. "Not your face," I said. not your hands. In the living room, the cover lifted and fell, a tap against the glass, hesitant, not a demand. The way you knock on a friend's door when you have overspoken at dinner and need to say I'm sorry without making a night of it. Come, I said to the room, and the knock stopped. I wrote my name on the bathroom mirror with my fingertip, just the first letter too large, just the last letter, looping back under to hold the rest. The steam licked the strokes and did not erase them. Mine, I said, and reached for the key where it waited on the sink. I pressed it against the glass. The metal cooled instantly, as if the mirror had taken heat as a tithe. The handprint faded. The letters held. The bathroom smelled like lemon and soap and tile, not iron, not keys. I dressed and went to the living room and touched the crochet with my knuckles, the way you pat a shoulder when you pass behind a chair. We can begin, the mirror said, very softly. Careful with the we. I already did, I said, and I will keep doing it. The apartment settled to the idea. The teapot rattled once without boiling. Rain found the window seam and wrote another small letter and lost interest. The Polaroid of loops stayed propped beside the salt, borderline ridiculous, completely correct. Nights I counted forward. Some nights I asked it to count with me, and it did, and when it tried to move ahead, I stopped and waited until it returned to where I was. Mornings, I kept what I had promised to keep, fear in my pocket, edge in my hand, name under the bowl, and left the rest uncarried. When a bus window borrowed my face, I took it back without argument. When the spoon tried a smile that didn't belong to the day, I turned the bowl down on the counter and ate with a fork, and the spoon sulked like spoons do, and then forgot. Once, in the crosswalk, a puddle showed me a sky full of moths. Not my sky, theirs. I stepped around it because puddles are also doors, and not all doors want an argument. A child behind me stomped both feet into it and laughed, and the moths flew apart into reflection, nothing but the white coin of the afternoon sun pulled to pieces. The child's mother called his name, and he answered, and the puddle was water again with a small scum of city on top, because nothing is ever only one thing. On the anniversary of nothing in particular, I ironed the cover, because cloth appreciates kindness when it is asked to do hard, unshowy work. I stitched the loose places with red thread, not neat but strong. I replaced the pushpins with brass tacks, 9 in all, odd on purpose. I taped on the back of the frame, where only the wall could read it, a list of the small rules we had made for living together. Count, don't rehearse, no names said for hunger, no faces borrowed for errands, pictures stay where pictures live, covers are garments, not gags. I wrote beneath the list in my grandmother's careful hand, copied from memory, if they start writing, write back, but not on glass. The mirror breathed. The breathing matched mine. It matched the buildings. It matched the long, slow count of a city willing itself to sleep and almost managing. The voice spoke once more, one more time, in the tone it used when it wanted to sound like aunt or friend or conscience. Do you want to be kept? Yes, I said, by me. The glass rested. The cover rested. I did not sit vigil the way I had those first nights, waiting for a trick, teeth set for a coin that would not fall. I folded laundry. I watered the plant I had rescued from the office because it had learned to thrive on neglect, and I wanted to teach it to thrive on attention. I texted Danny a photo of the brass tacks in a tidy row, and she sent back a heart that had learned how not to be embarrassing even in daylight. And sometimes when the sky goes thin and the building's hum aligns with the breath of whatever is old in the plumbing, I hear counting from behind the cover, quiet, competent, not in charge. On those nights I count too, not louder, not faster, just alongside, because being kept is a job, and I am good at jobs that are mostly persistence. When I lose track, I start again, and I do not apologize to numbers for not being faithful to their order. I stand at the window and name my reflections: lamp, glass, night, me, and I leave one unnamed on purpose, because mystery likes a chair at the table if it can mind its posture. There are still days when a window tries to offer me a better version of the life I'm living, and I am foolish enough to lean in. There are still mornings when the spoon shows me a mouth that wants to agree to everything, and I have to put it down before I leave the house. There are still nights when the bathroom fog writes a single word, please, and I wipe it away, and it returns, and I wipe it away again, and it learns the shape of my insistence. None of it is a cure. It's the work, a wall, ongoing, a door that believes, because we made it believe, that closed is also a kind of kindness. A mirror that learned boring, a person who did too. Before I sleep, I sometimes take the empty oval and hold it up to the covered mirror. 2 frames, one full, one honest. For a second I feel the angle wake, the cut, the hunger, the curiosity, and then it subsides, taught by paste and canvas and paper and staples and lemon and salt and names not said. I put the oval back. I touch the crochet and wish it good night like a neighbor. I slip the key under my pillow, not because I plan to use it in my sleep, but because objects remember what they are for and lend that certainty to nearby flesh. The storm returns in its season with rain this time. Respectable, not a performative blackout. The building remembers to exhale first. The cover stays still. The tea light has long since burned down to a thumbprint of wax. I close my eyes and count forward, and the counting is a road, and the road is mine, and at whatever hour the mirror begins its quiet arithmetic, it does it on my side of the wall, not because I let it in, but because I am keeping time, and the apartment, pleased, hums along. You can sleep to a story like this. It will keep counting if you forget. It will lift the cover of morning and not insist you look. It will wait at the edge of your breath and match it, not because it loves you, not because it is kind, but because you said no, enough times that the room began to understand your yes, and the demon, the angle, the cut that wanted names, sits where it sits, bored and learning, repeating your rules back to itself like a lullaby. It didn't write and has decided for now to sing. Now, on to the next story. The first wrong thing about the town was how it appeared only when I stopped looking for it. I had been driving long enough for the lines on the highway to turn into a lullaby that wanted my eyelids more than it wanted my wheels. The GPS had given up 15 miles back, the screen doing that embarrassed shimmer before blanking to a single sentence, rerouting, and then pretending it had never promised to know where we were. I told myself I'd stop at the next exit, any exit, even if it was just a gas station lit up like a spaceship that had decided to learn about beef jerky. The road gave me nothing until it gave me everything. An off-ramp that had no sign, a curve that felt like the road had reached out and taken my wrist, and then a 2-lane street lined with maples that should have been green but were already turning, each leaf a flame that hadn't told the branch yet. The town sat low and polite in the belly of a small valley, the hills around it hunching their shoulders as if to keep the wind from being rude. A metal arch over the road said welcome in letters that had been painted sometime between World War II and the invention of good taste. No name beneath, no founding date, no population sign, just the word you say when you own your front porch and your neighbor's opinion about it. I slowed without deciding. An old-fashioned gas station stood on the corner, pumps squat and fat, numbers clicking behind glass, as if someone had taught the air arithmetic. Across from it, a diner with a chrome edge that caught the late afternoon light and threw it back as a challenge. Farther down the main street, a hardware store with a bell on the door, a barber pole that actually turned, a storefront full of dresses, too careful to be worn on a Wednesday. People moved through it all like this had always been here, like they had been practicing this exact afternoon for years. The second wrong thing was the clock over the diner door, big round with numbers thick enough to see from the street, hands black as a decision. It said 4:17 when I pulled up outside the gas station. It said 4:17 after I cut the engine. It said 4:17 when I got out and stretched my back and heard my spine make the sound of dry kindling, remembering rain. A man stepped out from behind the station. He had a rag in his hand and a smile on his face, and the kind of posture that said both were habits, not personality. His coveralls were clean in the way coveralls never are, if you've actually spent your day in them. The name stitched over his heart said Eli in threads slightly darker than the cloth, like a shadow had learned to sew. Afternoon, he said. Looks like the road found you tired. That's about right, I said, because something in me had decided it would be a mistake to say I had found the town. Any chance you can top me off? And point me to a bathroom before I start making decisions I'll regret? We can do both, Eli said, and meant it, which made my neck loosen half an inch. He swung the hose toward my car with the grace of a man who has been pouring for decades. Bathrooms in the diner. Tell June you're my guest. I nodded and crossed the street. The bell over the door gave a sound like a laugh someone meant to swallow. The place was almost indecently familiar. Booths the red of a child's idea of cherries. Counter stools shining like they'd been buffed with elbow grease and pride. Pie domes on the counter, with slices arranged like they'd been taught geometry. A woman behind the counter looked up when I came in, and her face did a small loving thing I have only ever seen on people who have decided to be kind for a living. You're just in time, she said. We pull the coffee at 5, and the pies come out at 6. Bathrooms on the left. Eli said to say I'm his guest. I said because watching the way her eyes changed when I said his name felt like asking a building if it knew where it stood. Her smile warmed a fraction, as if the room had leaned closer to listen, and she wanted to make it comfortable. He takes care of everyone, she said. He'll take care of you. It's only gas, I said. Sometimes people need more and don't know how to say it, she answered, not unkind. Go on, we've got time. The bathroom was clean enough to make me suspicious. Not a speck on the sink, paper towels folded like the corner of a bedsheet. When I turned the faucet on, the water ran warm immediately, as if the pipes had anticipated my hands and had been waiting with the temperature decided. The mirror above the sink gave me back a face I recognized, but wouldn't have chosen, grayer at the edges than my last memory of myself. Eyes with the forward tilt of someone who keeps looking for the next exit, even while they're standing still. When I came back out, the diner's clock still said 4:07. Outside, the sky had changed by a shade you only notice when you've learned to keep time with your chest. The light fell softer, lower, as if the sun had remembered it had somewhere else to be. But the clock refused to be educated. June, the woman said when I thanked her. Pie later. Coffee now? I should settle up for gas, I said. Then coffee, and maybe directions. She slid a mug toward me, and the steam that rose from it smelled like the memory of being taken care of. We've got maps, she said, but you'll find your way if you sit a bit first. I carried the coffee outside to where Eli was replacing the pump handle with the formal precision of ritual. The window of my car had partly fogged from the inside, though the afternoon wasn't cold enough for it. I wiped a circle with my sleeve without thinking, and half expected to see my own breath hanging in the air, like a speech bubble demanding to be filled. Full up, Eli said. No rush to pay. June will put it on a card, town card, he said, and I must have looked like a person who had just learned fruit have names because he added, you don't need one, we keep track. I took out my wallet anyway, The bills felt like a promise I had made to myself. He put up a palm, patient. If you stay for supper, you won't mind the map. If you don't, it won't matter. What is this place? I asked, because my mother taught me small talk is a bridge, but also sometimes the only weapon you get. Home, he said simply. He said it the way a person points at a chair and names it to a child, not as argument, just as confirmation. And if I'm not from here? You're here now, Eli said. Behind him, the maples let go of 2 leaves at the same moment. They drifted down like they had remembered gravity and wanted to apologize for it. I paid anyway and felt the money vanish in a way that made me wonder if it had ever been mine. I took my coffee and walked the length of the main street because when you don't know what to do, your feet will decide to be more honest than your mouth. The town had all the pieces a place is supposed to have. A school with a playground out back, where a red swing twisted slowly without wind. A post office with a hand-lettered sign on the door that said "Out to lunch" in blue letters that cared about their posture. A church whose steeple needed a tired man with a ladder and a new coat of paint. A dog watched me from a porch with the solemn attention of an animal that trusts but verifies. A boy rode by on a bike with baseball cards in the spokes, the slap, slap, slap of their approval trailing him down the block. He lifted a hand, and I lifted mine, and when our waves met in the air, neither of us looked surprised. The third wrong thing was the absence of past tense. The town felt like it had never been anything else. No buildings under new names, no renovations half begun and promising to be finished someday. No ghosts of failed cafes. Every shop window was a present moment that had never had to be anything else. At the end of the street, the pavement curled and offered me a choice, left toward a water tower with the town's name blank, where the name belongs, right toward a road that climbed gently and then disappeared into trees. I took the right, because my legs have always believed in uphill the way some people believe in miracles. Halfway up the grade, a sign appeared on the right shoulder. It was not official, white paint on a plank, hammered into the ground by a hand that knew the pleasure of doing things carefully. It said pond with an arrow. Beneath it, smaller, good fishing. I don't fish, but I turned anyway because turning felt like admitting I might want to. The path wound through trees that had grown evenly spaced, as if they'd been told not to crowd. The smell of water met me before the water did, that clean wet that makes your mouth remember thirst, you already solved. The pond itself was a mirror laid into the earth with such gentleness the dirt hadn't protested. A dock sat on one side, wood gray with weather but not rot. A bench waited at the edge. A girl sat on it with her feet not reaching the ground, a sandwich in her lap. She looked up when I came near and considered me with the frankness only children and very old people allow themselves. You're new, she said. Today, I said. Maybe not tomorrow. There's always a tomorrow, she answered, as if that solved the problem. That depends on clocks. Only if you like numbers, she said, and took a careful bite. What's your name? I asked, because the rule about not giving your name to strange places had not yet arrived to sit on my shoulder. She took so long to answer I thought she would refuse, then said Lena, and swallowed like the syllables had edges. What's yours? Sam, I said, and the pond made a sound that might have been a frog, but felt like agreement. You live here. Everyone lives here, she said. She swung her feet, toes pointing, shoes scuffed the way shoes get when their owner forgets to look where they're going. Did you come for the festival? Festival? Tonight, she said, like I had missed a meeting. We light the lanterns. They float. She lifted her hand and wiggled her fingers. Like that. For what? People who came and are still coming, she said. For making wishes. Do wishes work? Only the ones that know where to go. She finished her sandwich and set the crust on the bench, and 3 ducks arrived without visible travel to negotiate for it. Eli says I should be home before supper to help June, she said, sliding off the bench. If you get lost, you won't be. Someone will find you, even if it's you. She trotted up the path, then stopped and turned. Don't go out on the dock after dark, she said. It's polite in the daylight. And at night, Wit forgets it's wood, she said, cheerful as warnings go, and ran on. I sat until the coffee was cold, and even after that, until I couldn't pretend I was still drinking it. The water threw my face back at me with small edits. The trees on the far side of the pond listened the way good listeners do, with their whole bodies. When I got up, the air had thickened by some degree I couldn't measure. The walk back felt shorter, which is either comfort or trap depending on your mood. At the edge of the main street, the clock over the diner still said 4:17. I checked my phone out of habit and discovered that it had decided to have a signal again, but only for the time, 4:17 there too. The date looked right. The carrier name had been replaced by a single word, home. I turned the phone off. There is only so much lying you can watch a little machine do before you feel complicit. Back at the gas station, Eli had produced a squeegee from somewhere and was making my windshield. Remember what glass is supposed to look like when you can see through it. Festival tonight, he said, not looking up. You should stay. June made soup. I was supposed to be somewhere, I said, and when the sentence reached my mouth, I realized I could not remember where. Not in the ways that mattered. Exits, turnoffs, that one idea of a diner with a pretzel logo 20 miles out, but in the way where a place stops calling you when you've stopped wanting to be called. We'll get you there, he said. No one's in a hurry. That's the only rule, and it's a kind one if you mean it. What if I don't? Eli wiped the squeegee on the rag and finally met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw something like mischief move across his face, like wind on a pond. Then you'll make trouble, he said, and we'll be polite about it. I took a room over the diner because the sign on the door said rooms, and because the idea of leaving felt like standing up in the middle of a song. June brought me a key threaded on a ribbon. The room had a bed with a quilt that looked like someone's grandmother had decided stars belonged on Earth. The window opened onto the side street and a view of the hardware store where a man was measuring twine with the focus of a surgeon. I put my bag down. It looked smaller here. I splashed water on my face and couldn't tell whether it was colder or my skin had learned to be warmer. When I went back downstairs, June set a bowl in front of me without asking. Chicken noodle, the kind that teaches your mouth to slow down. The spoon felt like a vote I could cast without consequences. You're in time, she said. Lanterns at dusk. Eli said not to hurry, I said. He tells everyone that. Is it true? It's true as long as you like it, she said. When it isn't true, it's still kinder to say it. People began to gather without the fuss that usually accompanies groups. Children carried paper bags with handles that looked like they had been cut by small hands with big scissors. Men in jackets too light for the evening shrugged them closer as if to keep their statements from escaping. An old woman with hair the color of a storm cloud held a bundle of thin sticks like arrows. June wiped the counter clean with a cloth that had known its shape for years, and then came around to stand next to me, her hand on my elbow, as if to make sure I didn't forget the relationship between bodies and gravity. Out back, she said. We'll walk to the pond together. Easier that way. The clock over the door said 4:17. The sky said otherwise, deepening by the breath into that blue the day gives, as a parting gift, so you will be grateful even when you're tired. We walked. The town moved as a single organism made out of smaller ones, each person an intention that had made friends with other intentions. Eli joined on my other side, the rag still in his pocket like a talisman. You'll make a wish? He asked. I'll think of one, I said. It's better if you say it aloud, June said. Otherwise the water makes up its own version. That seems dangerous. Only if you can't swim, she said, and for a moment I did not know if she had made a joke. The pond waited like it had been practicing all afternoon to pretend it had just been born. Someone had strung lights through the trees without making them look like decoration. The dock poked into the water with an innocence I did not trust. A table held paper lanterns with little metal ribs, squares that would box light, circles that would learn to be moons. June put one in my hands, and the thin paper told my palms it was softer than anything meant to hold fire. We light, and we let go, she said, and we don't take back. What if someone floats away? They do when they're ready, she said. Children ran along the shore until a voice that knew their names said their names, and they stopped with the obedience of bodies that have never yet had to argue with a clock. The girl from the bench, Lena, waved her arms to make more attention exist in her direction. We have a new one, she announced, pointing straight at me with the fairness of an arrow. He came at 4:17. A ripple of pleasure went through the crowd, the kind that says newness is welcome only because it means we were not wrong to wait. Eli raised his hand, and the sound settled without shushing. June gave me a lighter. Say it, she said, then light it, then let it go. My mouth opened, and my mind, traitor, went blank. I could have wished for anything, for rest, for money, for a map that didn't lie, for my mother to forgive me for that last conversation, when we both kept our pride like a small mean dog on a leash. What came out of my mouth surprised me because it did not surprise the pond. I want to remember where I was going, I said. Lena clapped once, delighted. Eli nodded as if I had passed a test I didn't know I was taking. June's hand pressed my elbow. Good, she said. Good. I lit the lantern. The flame took politely, then with more confidence, learning its paper house quickly. I carried it to the edge and placed it on the skin of the pond, the way you put ashore on a sleeping child. It drifted, then decided to move where all the others were moving, a small constellation, making a map that only the water could read. Around me, voices rose, small, private, sentences with edges that sometimes caught on breath, wishes about health, about forgiveness, about small, stupid arguments that turned into the shape of rooms people don't like to be in. Someone said a name, and the water made the sound back like a hand smoothed over a wrinkled sheet. The lanterns drifted toward the middle and began to move in a slow spiral. I don't know if the pond did that, or if the air did, or if dozens of wishes made the water decide to be a clock after all. The sky had become full night. No stars. The town made its own. The lanterns brightened as if distance fed them. The people around me began to breathe like the day had run, and stopped, and was finally allowed to stand still and put its hands on its knees and laugh in relief. Behind my right shoulder, a voice very close and very gentle said, "Now you can stay." I turned, but there was no one pressed near enough to have spoken. Eli looked at me, unblinking. June watched the lights, her face the same soft gravity as the water. Lena was whispering something elaborate to her lantern, as if it had a pocket, and she was packing it a snack. The voice came again, not to my ear this time, but to the part of me that remembers who I said I'd be. "Now you can stay," it said, and this time I knew it was the town. I put my hands in my pockets and felt nothing but my hands. I said nothing because I didn't yet know which words were counted. The lanterns turned in their small circle, and somewhere a bell rang once, the kind of single note that means you'll be late for nothing if you don't hurry. Thank you for listening. If this story kept you company tonight, consider liking the video and subscribing for more myths, legends, and gentle hauntings. Sleep well, and may the trails you choose lead you safely home.